national security. What is happening right now is that we are waiting for quorum to be achieved, and as you can see on your screen, the sergeant at arms are counting the members that walk in one by one and noting down so that they can keep track of the numbers as they trickle in. The number required is 50 members, and without that particular number, then business cannot begin. Currently, the quorum bell is being rung, and after the 10 minutes, if there is no sufficient quorum or requisite quorum, then the speaker will again order the quorum bell to be rung. The member for Kinango constituency, Honorable Benjamin Dalus Stephen Tayahari, will ask the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development to explain why the Mazeras Kinango Road has not been rehabilitated for the last 1.5 years, despite funds being allocated for it. And could the Cabinet Secretary further explain why the contractor has not been identified for the construction of Mariakani Kinango Kwale Road to bitumen standard, despite the project having been tendered under the P tender number Kenha 1575/2017. These questions will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing. The nominated Member of Parliament, Honorable David Ole Sankok, will ask the Cabinet Secretary for Environment and Forestry Resources about the measures the ministry is putting in place or has put in place to control and eradicate the water hyacinth, scientifically referred to as the water hyacinth in Lake Victoria and other water bodies in Kenya. And also the Cabinet Secretary should state whether there are private organizations interested in partnering with the national or county government research institutions or communities to assist in the eradication of the weed. The Honourable Member will be getting this reply before the Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. We are still waiting for quorum to be achieved. As it stands currently, the business of the House cannot begin. Abortion by the Chairperson, Public Investment Committee, is also in the order of business this morning, and the debate on this motion was concluded. The only thing remaining, or the only business remaining, is the question to be put. The motion regards the 22nd report on audited financial statements for state corporations. Another motion by the Chairperson, Public Accounts Committee, on the report of the examination of the Auditor General's report on the financial statement for the national government, is also active in the House, and the last time this was debated was on Wednesday, 28th November 2018, during the morning sitting, and there is an amendment which has been made to this particular motion, and question on the amendment will be put, and thereafter, and their quorum has been achieved.
We have quorum now. Let's get into business. Honorable members, first order.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers. Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
On questions, we have the first question. The first is one by Honorable Joseph Tonui.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to ask this question number 197 of 2018. And I'm directing my question, Honorable Speaker, to the Cabinet Secretary for Education. Is the Cabinet Secretary aware that the following schools in Kuresoi South constituency have not been registered, despite meeting the standard requirements for school registration? Chepkosiken Primary, Chebirwoibe, Chebalungu, Kabande, Kimogul, Magichait, Ruaget, Lelechuet, Sangawet, Kiptangoton, Angurwet, primary schools, and Kapongoi Secondary School in Tinet Ward, Highlands, Baraka, Pondet, Kimugul, Gosemia, Shambandevu, Masiwa, Tuyabei in Kerenget Ward, Paragayuet in Amalo Ward, and Pondet in Kiptakich Ward. Number 2, when will the said schools be registered to enable the students get free education funds from the government? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
That question will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Education and Research. The next question is by Honorable Martin Peters Owino.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask question number 204, 2018, to the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Infrastructure, Housing, and Urban Development. Is the Cabinet Secretary aware that the Rodi Kopany Karungu Sori Road that serves Rangwe, Ndewa, Gwasi, Uriri, Nyatike, and Homa Bay constituency in Homa Bay and Migori is now impassable in a horrible condition and has been in state of disrepair for the past 30 years, impacting negatively on local transportation, emergency evacuation, and businesses. Number 2, Mr. Speaker, you will allow me to skip this because I've got a call from the Kenya Roads Board that is taken care of, so I go to question number C. Number C, could the Cabinet Secretary state the specific department responsible for repairs and maintenance of the said roads, and further give a list of contractors and how much funds meant for the said roads have been disbursed by the ministry to the said contractors from the 1990 to date? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That question will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works, and Housing. The next question is by Honorable Jackson Lekumontare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This question is directed to Cabinet Secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government. Is the Cabinet Secretary aware of the death of one Ulpanare Lepeta, a miner from Donyo Nasip allocation of Samburu East constituency as a result of an attended and exploded ordnance allegedly left by police officers from Wamba Police Station in 2017? B, what steps has the ministry taken to remove other unexploded ordinances from the area to prevent further loss of life? C, Mr. Speaker, when will the Lepeta family be compensated following the death of the miner? Thank you.
Honorable Jackson, this is important for you for record to say what question number it is.
Sorry, question 208 of 2018.
Very well. That question will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security. The next member to ask the question is Honorable Michael Kingi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the question number 210 of 2018 to the Cabinet Secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government. Is the Cabinet Secretary aware that on 7th November 2018 at around 1 p.m., one Mr. Juma Bahati Shanga was allegedly shot and seriously injured by a police officer from Adu Police Station who was positively identified by both the area deputy County Commissioner and the Officer Commanding Police Division, Adu Police Station. B. What action are the ministry taking following on a complaint raised through a letter reference MGRI/08/011/18 Volume 1 dated 18th November 2018 and the disciplinary action taken against the police officer involved? C. Could the ministry consider compensating, facilitating access to treatment and settling medical bills incurred by Mr. Juma Bahati Shanga, who has since been lying helplessly and without specialized treatment at the Malindi Sub-County General Hospital? Thank you.
Yeah, that question will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security. The next member is to ask a question is Honorable Wafula Wamunyinyi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to ask question number 228 of 2018 to the Cabinet Secretary for Lands and Physical Planning. Mr. Speaker, A, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that public land set aside for a police station and administrative offices in the Marakaru Tuti Ward in Kandui constituency has since been irregularly allocated to private persons? B, is the Cabinet Secretary further aware that some government offices and various parcels of land in Bungoma town have been converted to private land and are now owned by individuals? C, what measures has the ministry put in place to repossess all those irregularly allocated pieces of government land and houses? I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There we go. That question will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Lands. The next question will be asked by Honorable Malimo Albere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask question number 239 of 2018, which is addressed to the Cabinet Secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government. My question, A, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that there is increased insecurity in Leisami's constituency, allegedly posed by people living at Serima village, which is a new satellite settlement site for the Lake Turkana wind power project? B, who are in possession of illegal firearms? C, could the ministry outline measures taken to ensure that the area is secure and further consider putting up a police post or station to monitor and manage security in this area? Thank you.
That question will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security. The next question will be asked by Honorable Benjamin Dalu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask question number 240 of 2018, directed to the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Developments. A, could the Cabinet Secretary explain why the Mazeras Kinango Road has not been rehabilitated for the last 1.5 years, despite funds being allocated for? B, could the Cabinet Secretary further explain why a contractor has not been identified for the construction of Mariakani, Kinango, Kwale Road to bitumen standard, despite the project having been tendered under the PPP tender number Kenha/1575/2017? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That question will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing. The last member to ask a question today this morning is Honorable Ole Sankok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to ask question number 259 of 2018. And my question is directed to the Cabinet Secretary for Environment and Forestry Resources. The first question will be, what measures has the ministry put in place to control and eradicate the water hyacinth, scientifically referred as Econia crepes, in Lake Victoria and other water bodies in Kenya? B, state whether there are private organizations interested in partnering with the government, either national or county government, research institution, or communities to assist in the eradication of this weed. Honorable Speaker, I asked this one in the spirit of the handshake, since even Baba was here yesterday.
Very well. That question by Honorable Sankok will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. Next order. Next one.
Order number 8, 22nd report of the audited financial statements for state corporations. Question to be put.
Order. Other members, the debate had ended on this particular item, so we are just putting the question on this one. Honorable members, I put the question that this House adopts the 22nd report of the Public Investment Committee on audited financial statements for state corporations laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, November 6, 2018. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, motion. Report on the examination of the Auditor General's report on the financial statements for the national government.
Very well. Honorable members, to refresh the memory of members is that on this report, there was an amendment when the House rose yesterday that had been canvassed by quite a number of members, and what remained was actually to put the question on the amendment by Honorable Junet, and after that we shall proceed. Therefore, honorable members, order. That must be Honorable Wino. Order, Honorable Wino. Honorable members, I will be putting the question on the amendment proposed by Honorable Junet, that the motion be amended by inserting the following expression immediately after the expression 2018, subject to A, deletion of the committee recommendation contained in paragraph 395.2 of the report and substitution thereof with the following new recommendation. The Auditor General to, within 3 months after adoption of this report, undertake further audit in order to establish the circumstances in which restricted tendering was adopted in the construction of a model county office in Embu by the State Department on Environment and Natural Resources during financial year 2014 and 2014-2015. B, deletion of the committee recommendation contained in paragraph 395.5 of the report and substitution thereof with the following new recommendation. The Auditor General to, within 3 months after the adoption of this report, undertake further audit on the propriety of using restricted tendering for fencing projects at various meteorological projects by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources during the financial year 2014-2015. And C, deletion of the committee recommendation contained in paragraph 395.7 of the report and substitution thereof with the following new recommendation. The Auditor General to, within 3 months after adoption of this report, undertake further audit on the propriety of contracts to various suppliers to supply seedlings to various destinations by the State Department on Environment and Natural Resources during the financial year 2014-2015. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honorable members, I will be directing that so that we dispense with all the amendments. As you can see from your order paper, there are a number of amendments. that we proceed and get all the amendments, so that then when we dispense, the House dispenses with the amendments, we are able to deal with the report as amended or otherwise. The next amendment is by Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I beg to move the amendment as proposed on the order paper. And Honorable Chair, I think it's important to simply expound on what the amendment intends to achieve. If you read the report on page 18, Honorable Chair, the report points out to... Yes, Chair.
What is your point of order?
The majority is asking where I'm taking his report.
The majority leader is
Chair.
on the floor on a point of order.
Chair, you have seen the way Honorable Ichung'wah is behaving. He just picks my copy and he virtually stealing. Mr. Speaker, you know this is the behavior of the big tribes in Kenya. They believe the marginalized groups don't exist. So, but because he's my chair and I'm supporting his amendment, let me give him now grace.
Very well, and it seems to be a spirit of good neighborliness. Honorable Ichung'wah.
Honorable Chair, you know, now that I'm on borrowed copies of House records. Honorable Chair, page 18 is the recommendation that I'm seeking to amend. And basically, this recommendation, one was asking that the accounting officer, that's two, the accounting officer, Dr. Kamadhugo, should be reprimanded for accumulating pending bills amounting to 632 billion at the National Treasury for the financial year 2014-2015. And Honorable Chair, I think the issue of pending bills, Honorable Chair, is something that is actually anticipated by our own laws under the Public Finance Management Act, that there is no time that government will operate and be able to pay all its bills.
Honorable Imo, what is your intervention? Honorable Imo presses an intervention and is busy engaging Honorable Pukose. Honorable Imo, what is your intervention?
Yeah, give me on this other side. All right. All right. Honorable Speaker, when I press, I'm a serious legislator.
What is the issue?
I cannot be asleep like others who are sleeping. Honorable Speaker, my point of order is this, Mr. Honorable Speaker. I want to seek your guidance on how we put questions on amendments in this House. You see, when Honorable Ichung'wah is doing an amendment like what he's doing, in his amendment, there is a subsection 1 and 2. And when the question by Honorable Junet was being put, it had 3 subsections. This is what I want to seek your guidance. When we put a general question, you sometimes lose the substance of a question because it is just put as a blanket. So I am suggesting that because we are dealing with serious issues, we should be putting a question per subsection so that we appear to be a serious House, Honorable Speaker.
Well, if for example, you are to use the one that the House has just made a decision on, you realize actually it was relating to the same ministry. It is, yes, it is several amendments, but relating to the same ministry. That's why we put the question together. But when it is on completely different items, I agree with you, we should put them separated. But if they are related in the same ministry, and especially if the mover could get to the details, because Honorable Imo, one of the issues you want to be clear, and indeed all members, is actually the import of the amendment, so that it is completely clear to the members what is the import of the amendment so that when they are making a decision, they are completely aware. Honorable Ichung'wa.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. As I was saying, Honorable Limo, as he says, is a serious legislator, and his point of order was quite in order. Honorable Chair, I was just explaining the basis of that amendment, Honorable Chair, saying that indeed the Public Finance Management Act does envisage that there will be pending bills at the end of every financial year. As you are aware, Honorable Speaker, pending bills actually do form the first charge in succeeding financial years, and this is provided for specifically under various national treasury circulars that guides accounting officers, given government is a going concern and therefore cannot keep transactions for long. Therefore, Honorable Chair, it would be wrong for us to be seen to be indicting an accounting officer on the basis of something that is already provided for in law in terms of pending bills. And therefore, I'm proposing that we delete that particular amendment and replace it with the text as it is, that particular recommendation, and replace it with the text as it is on the order paper to just say that the accounting officer, Dr. Kamau Duge, puts in place measures to forestall the accumulation of pending bills at the National Treasury. And I think that would be the fair recommendation, Honorable Chair, and I beg for support on that recommendation. I don't know, with your guidance, Chair, whether I move to the second one or we... Chair, I move to the second one?
Yes.
I prosecute both.
And give the import of the second as well.
Honorable Chair, thank you for your guidance. The second amendment, Honorable Chair, is in relation to the recommendation on page 19 again. If you look at the committee observations and findings, the accounting officer, one is that the accounting officer failed to ensure that interest amounting to 3.250777 shillings that were due were recovered within the stipulated time as per the provisions of PFM Act 2012 and Regulation 93 of the PFM Act regulations. Instructively, Honorable Chair, you will note that the second observation under that says that the committee marked the matter as resolved. Then, in a very contradictory manner, the committee then proceeds to recommend that the accounting officer be reprimanded for failure to manage interest and ensuring that outstanding interest due are surrendered in time in line with the provisions of the PFM Act. And Honorable Chair, is again important to note, not just the contradiction that the matter has already been settled, but again, this is business that goes on even in this House. Members of Parliament will have traveled. Honorable Chair, if Honorable Chris Omala would allow me to prosecute. Honorable Chair.
Order. If there is a member who is raising on a point of order and Honorable Omala has, Honorable Ichung'wa, let's give him a minute.
What is out of order?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I want to seek your direction on this. Honorable Ichung'wa, whom I respect so much, is the chairman of the Budget Committee. The amendment is bringing actually are very substantive. And we know very well in Parliament, Mr. Speaker, any amendment that comes must be on the order paper. I listened keenly to his first amendment, which I have a concern, I'll be opposing it later, but he went to the second one. But when we check the order paper, and my minority leader here has also been struggling to see where is this second amendment that he's talking about, and yet is not reflecting on the order paper. It's only the first one.
Just below it.
Below it where?
Honorable Amalwa, there is Honorable Amalwa. Honorable Ichung'wa has two amendments, or one amendment, but in two parts. Part 1 and part 2, and certainly he is giving the import of the part 2. Honorable Ichung'wa, please proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Maybe Honorable Chris Omala has left his specs. Or maybe it's the text, the English in the text, but it's very simple English, and he's a seasoned teacher. He should be able to read this very simple English. And therefore, Chair, I was saying, in the ordinary course of business, even for us as members of Parliament, by the 30th of June, when the financial year, any financial year closes, it is normal that somebody could be out of the country and you are holding interest. And therefore, a matter to do with interest as at the close of the financial year is not something so criminal. And if anything, Honorable Chair, and I think when I engaged with the chairman of the committee, he largely agreed with me, that if you look at the observation number 2, the committee has actually marked that matter as resolved It's already settled. Therefore, again, Honorable Chair, it will not be fair to indict an accounting officer on the basis of something that will always happen at the end of every financial year. Even for us here, Honorable Speaker. For instance, at the end of this financial year, I was out of the country myself. And it so happens at times that officers in government could be out of the country maybe for inordinately longer periods of time than envisaged. But what happens is that they will account for this money eventually, as the committee has rightly observed that this money was eventually accounted for. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I beg for support for those amendments.
Who seconds?
Just because he has thank you. Yeah, you know, Honorable Ichungwa is the only member who came to this house unopposed. So that has given him some latitude that he's more superior than the other 48 members. And you know, because he comes from Kikuyu around here, and he thinks he's a MP for a whole community by virtue of the name, you should bring him to size. But I support. I think what we have said, and Chair, before I even support, I want to ask members, let us be very careful this morning. Because Public Accounts Committee report and Public Investment report, those are the core committees that you can say they perform the oversight of Parliament. That's where the audited reports are done. So let us not come with all flimsy amendments. But to support this, on Kamau Thuge, Chair, when I read this report, it's not also good to be very unfair on accounting officers. Speaker, there's a member of Parliament who said last night, my heart is not with the bill. I want to assure him that I am not a gay. The only person who can read my heart is my wife. Yes, you know, yeah. Nobody else can read my heart, including himself and the Almighty God. My heart is not with the gender bill. So I want to assure him that I come from a very strong Islamic religious background, and I believe in, that's why I support Trump. I believe in those parties that believe in family values. So I'm not a gay. And you can't read my heart. So if you are one, then you can look for another one. Yes, only my wife and the Almighty. But Kamau Thuge has a very good case to be argued for. And Honorable Mbandi is an accountant. He's being indicted for 3.2 million unaccounted interest that took place when the financial year was coming to an end. Even ourselves, as members of Parliament, if we go on a tour, on a trip, at the end of the financial year, we can only account for our interest the next financial year. Unless this House will pass a law that month when the books are being closed, nobody should leave. Nobody should go out of the country, no government official. So I think on that basis, because Parliament must be fair also to accounting officers. I think the second one, if I am right, because Honorable Ichungwa has also ambushed me, is about the one on the pending bills. But if you look at this, the issue of the pending bills, even the committee appreciates that the accounting officers, National Treasury, appeared before the committee, and the National Treasury had cleared all pending bills for the financial year 2014-2015. And that is the report which is here. I'm sure 2015-2016, then they will be given an opportunity to clear all pending bills. But even the report, when I read, that matter has been settled. And again, Chair, so the issue of reprimanding the accounting officer, National Treasury, should not arise in this report, because already the committee feels that the pending bills have been adequately answered. Finally, Chair, I think the PS National Treasury should be treated like all other accounting officers. Of course, he has other extra responsibilities, but each and every accounting officer that passes through this house, because most of the accounting officers are principal secretaries, and chair of Public Accounts Committee, who have done a very good job. I think what we need to do, any principal accounting officer, like a PS, we must put it in the report that if he has audit issues, anybody who had an audit issues, that becomes the stage for that person not to be appointed for a position. And that when we are doing vetting, that person should not be cleared. Chair, the problem we have in this country is Parliament. Is Parliament the problem? Because there are people who have been indicted in reports of committees that some of their recommendations are that so-and-so cannot hold public office. It's a very serious indictment. But you'll find that person being given a job, and a committee of this house clears that person. That is the problem is. Parliament is a house of records. If you are indicted in a Public Accounts Committee report or even PIC report or any other committee report that you cannot hold public office, that you embezzle public resources, you cannot. This house has no moral obligation to vet you and clear you. So I think we should start from this year financial Public Accounts Committee report that, and the clerk of the National Assembly must keep record that the following people in the 11th Parliament were indicted not to hold public office. So the President is advised not to appoint so-and-so to any constitutional office. So I support. I think the one of Kamau Thuge makes sense. One is on the interest, and the other one is on the pending bills. And I'm sure all of us together today we support the chair of Public Accounts Committee. And Mr. Speaker, this morning I came early, and I told Honorable Wandai, in my life I have never seen, this is the first day I'm seeing today, people coming with amendments to amend either Public Accounts Committee audited reports. It has never happened in the 10th Parliament or 11th Parliament. So please, if your relative has eaten money, he has eaten. So you better go and share with him, but not, you don't come and amend the report of the Public Accounts Committee. We will not. But Kamau Thuge, I second, and I think he has a genuine cause.
Honorable members, order. Order, Honorable Kenan. They are calling you Commissioner, but you are Honorable Kenan. Honorable members, I will propose a question that the motion be amended by inserting following immediately after the words November 14th, 2018, subject to 1, deletion of recommendation number 2 appearing on page 18 under paragraph 4, pending bills, and substituting thereof the following. The accounting officer, Dr. Kamau Thuge, puts in place measures to forestall the accumulation of pending bills at the National Treasury, contrary to the provisions of Section 12(2)(b) of the Public Finance Management Act 2012, which mandates the National Treasury to ensure proper management and control of and accounting for the finances of the national government and its entities in order to promote the efficient and effective use of budgetary resources at the national level. And 2, deletion of the committee recommendation under paragraph 5, outstanding interest appearing on page 19 of the report, and substituting therefore the following. The accounting officer, Dr. Kamau Thuge, puts in place measures to manage interest and ensure outstanding interest are surrendered on time in line with the provisions of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and Regulation 93 of the Public Finance Management National Government Regulations 2015. Honorable members, we'll just have a few on this amendment, and then the House will make a decision. And please, honorable members, the ones that are given on this chance, restrict yourself on the amendment, not on the report. I'll start with the minority leader, Honorable Badi.
Mr. Speaker, I hope the House will forgive my voice. I'm almost losing it, but I hope I'll be heard. Mr. Speaker, first of all, allow me to, I don't know whether to say declare my interest, because you know, sometimes you have relationship with some government officials, that makes it a bit personal, you become friends. And I have to be clear on this because when the issue of, Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence, the issue of sugar came up and I made my contribution very well on it. I was later accused of being friend of Rotich, and it is true. It's true, I'm actually Rotich's friend. But you see, you have a problem again with the Tatu City. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, let me confine myself to this. Mr. Kamau Thuge is actually my friend. We have interacted a lot, and so when I make my contribution, it should be understood in that context, but I'll be objective. Mr. Speaker, I'm also aware that I'm the leader of minority, and we should hold the government to account. Two things, and we have to thank the Public Accounts Committee for doing a very good job of looking at the accounts and the reports, and the Auditor General for bringing these issues. I want to confine myself to these two amendments. Let me start with the interest. Whereas I agree with the mover of the amendment that really interest, people take interest, and by the way, I've been a victim of this issue of interest, where my name appeared in accounts because I took interest close to 30th. In fact, 30th June found me outside the country. And so your name appears that you owe interest. But I think what the committee is trying to do is to try to rein on the accounting officers to ensure, and AIE holders, to ensure that interests are not released too close to the end of financial year. So that, because they distort accounts, Mr. Speaker, we have to accept that. But, Mr. Speaker, if the matter had actually been resolved, then I think it would be too harsh to again reprimand the PS. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm also having a problem with the terminology, the wordings. I think our clerks, and this is not for the committee really, the clerks also need to put words that make sense. You know, when you say reprimand, by who? How do you reprimand the PS? By who? If we want, I think we need to be bold. I think we need to be bold. And if we feel someone has failed, especially the PS Treasury is not just a PS. This is actually, to me, a super PS. This PS, if we feel he's not discharging his responsibility, I would be more comfortable if the committee recommends that we remove him from office. That makes a lot of sense. And then we would debate. But you know, when you talk about reprimand, hold to account, sometimes it is even difficult to understand. So I would probably plead with the House that we support that amendment just because the committee had observed that the matter had actually been resolved. On the issue of accumulated pending bills, I don't want to agree with the mover by saying it is normal. I think this is bad practice in government, and it has come to a stop. In fact, I agree with the committee that pending bills should be discouraged, and the people to discourage it is actually the Treasury. My thinking was that this recommendation should have not just targeted the PS in regards to the pending bills at the Treasury. We should have made a recommendation that the government should be clear with accounting officers that without money, if the money has not been released, if there is no AIE, then the accounting officers should not start or do the procurement, so that we don't accumulate pending bills. Because, like Mr. Speaker, you'll agree with me, CDF, the reason why there is no pending bills under CDF is because you cannot start even procurement for a CDF project unless and until there is AIE. And the AIE will not be released unless and until the finances are released. But, Mr. Speaker, I support the amendments, but I want to urge that we have to agree to put a recommendation and find a way of discouraging pending bills. Pending bills is a problem in the counties. It's actually killing counties, Mr. Speaker. And pending bills are here at the national government. It is weighing down on us, and it is a matter that we cannot just treat casually. I will not agree on that with the chair of the budget, because actually should know better that pending bills is distorting the accounting of this country. We are accounting on cash basis. And so when you are accounting on a cash basis, we are understating our expenditure by the pending bills, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Should we, on my right, should we have the one who has registered interest to speak on this, Honorable Pukose?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I want to support this amendment by the member for Kikuyu, Honorable Ishungwa. Mr. Speaker, as you know, issues of interest, even many members of this House who have taken interest towards the close of the financial year have been listed in even newspapers on a list of shame that they owe Parliament some money, when in reality, it is a question of the interest which they took, which had been utilized, and because of the close of the financial year, these members are not able to surrender the interest. And even when they surrender, that the IFMI system at that time is closed. So it's not able to, the system is not able to account for this. And it does not just happen to the members of Parliament. It happens to even civil servants, anybody working for government. So I think this is a good amendment, and I support.
Very well. Honorable members, let's get one more person, then we make progress. Please remember, we are just dealing with the amendment. There is a bigger part of the full report that is still pending. Honorable Malo, let me go to the extreme. Honorable Makali.
What do you mean, Mr. Omalo? Is there anybody who is not a leader in this house? We are all leaders. You're only one among the equals. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you for giving me this chance. I want to support these amendments, but I will make the following observation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think as a house, we need to be serious. And I think if we want to help this country, we must do things correctly. Mr. Speaker, we are talking about interest. The fact that somebody said this matter was resolved, I agree. We need to get this out of the report. But Mr. Speaker, the kind of explanations I'm hearing here, as a person who has a bit of experience in this area, I'm not convinced. Mr. Speaker, at what point does the Auditor General come to look at these reports of the ministries? Does he come immediately after the accounts are closed? He comes about 6 months after. And Mr. Speaker, the point is, when you get impressed, Mr. Speaker, it is very clear immediately you come back from your trip or wherever you have gone, you have only 48 hours to account. So when this house starts saying interest can be taken by close of the year, are we telling Kenyans people travel for 6 months, 10 months? Is that what we are telling Kenyans? Because on a serious note, the Auditor General doesn't come immediately. So I think even as we support this amendment, Mr. Speaker, it is important as members of Parliament, we adhere to the financial regulations. The truth of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, this issue of interest in this country is a major issue. And I think we need to help the PAC, as they have done, to punish these elements in the government who are not surrendering interest, Mr. Speaker. So the truth of the matter is, the arguments being put forward here, to me, they don't make sense. The thing is, let people surrender interest. By the time the Auditor General comes, interest will be surrendered. On the matter of the issue of the pending bills, Mr. Speaker, with all due respect to my chairman, and this is one of the things Mr. Chairman is harassing us all over the place. Please, let's help this house sort out pending bills. By this kind of loose statements which are not strong, we are not helping this country. So I agree that the issue of pending bills, the way it is structured, might be too punitive to an individual called Dr. Duque, who I also know because I'm in the budget committee and interact. But I think even Duque must know that even at personal level, you don't need car expenses if you have no money, really. You can't go to a shop now saying, give me this shirt, and you're not paying. Or you're not telling the owner of the shirt when you will pay. So we need to be serious in terms of financial management. But I support Mr. Speaker. But let's also make sure that the kind of arguments we push forward as a house don't send the wrong signal to Kenyans. Thank you, I support.
Very well. really, members, let's make progress on this particular one, so that there are two other amendments as yet, and then members who need an opportunity to speak to the main report. So, honourable members, I'll pend putting the question on that one for obvious reasons. I will the question on that will be put at a subsequent time. Shall I now call Honourable Owen Bayer on the other amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I would like to make the following amendment to the report, that the motion be amended by inserting the following immediately after the words November 14th, 2018, subject to deletion of the recommendation appearing under paragraph 243, item number 2, on page 277 of the report, and substituting therefore the following. The accounting officer, during the year under review, be reprimanded for introducing a new criterion during evaluation and comparison of tenders and proceedings to cancel the tender for lowest bidder, contrary to Section 66(2) of the Public Procurement Disposal Act and Section 74(4)(a) of the Public Finance Management Act 2012. I know this is a voluminous report, and the committee did a commendable job. They went into the details of the report, but there are certain things that they could have carried some mistakes that invariably could have been made by the Auditor General at that particular time. Because it is a fact that during the time when this contract was signed, there was a different PS, and that PS actually did sign the contract. The President on the 14th of August 2014 issued an order to transfer the PSs, and the new PS came in after 20th, the PS that is named here, of August. This contract was signed on the 12th of August. And if you look at the reports that are there, the PS, according to the information that you have, was Mutea Iringo. He was the first PS of Interior at that particular time, and signed the contract as it were. But then when the Auditor General makes the recommendation, cites the PS who comes in after Dr. Monica Juma, who is named in this report, but she came in after the contract had been signed. And therefore, I think there could have been an error of omission or commission or whatever intention it was, but this is a factual thing that I'm talking about. It's a fact that Mutea Iringo signed the contract. But to call for the reprimand of another PS on a mistake, the PS who signed the contract should take responsibility and not another PS who comes in. And therefore, I'm saying that it's possible it was just an error, that probably at that time when the audit was carried, probably the person that was there was the PS name. But it's a factual thing. And you can check any record, and you will know that Mutea Iringo was that time. And Kimayo signed as a witness at that particular time. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I think we should not sacrifice people, or we should not put that on people, whatever it is that is intended, just because we want to do that. But the facts must be established. And, Mr. Speaker, what I'm putting on the table are facts.
Order, Honourable Bayer. What is your point of order, Honourable Majority Leader?
Chair, I don't want to interrupt Honourable Bayer, but he has used a very, very dangerous word. Parliamentary committees don't sacrifice people. I want him to withdraw that statement. Chair, the word that I don't feel that any committee, and most of the Public Accounts Committee under Honourable Wandai, will sacrifice an individual. The Public Accounts Committee, Mr. Speaker, for benefit of doubt, the Public Accounts Committee analyzes, reports, evidence presented to them by the Auditor General, and they give each and every accounting officer an opportunity to bring his case. So I really want him to withdraw that word, sacrifice, and then paraphrase it.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I would like to withdraw the word sacrifice. Prosecutors say this, that the Public Accounts Committee looks at reports that have been written
very well
by
the Auditor General. And it is these reports whose information they analyze. Sometimes they take that information.
Very well.
And in this case, I do not think that the named PS here was given an opportunity to be heard on the same. And therefore, I would request the House that we amend this and delete that paragraph and replace it subsequently with.
Who seconds you?
Thank you. I would like to ask Mheshimiwa Manzo to support.
Honorable Manzo, if we can just be brief so that
Yes,
then we're able to.
I'll be brief, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank you for that opportunity. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the amendment, it is saying the accounting officer during the year under review. The amendment is specific such that instead of naming names, because you may lay liability on a PS who may not be, the amendment is requesting that the accounting officer during the year under review. So it means from records, then Parliament will be able to know exactly which permanent secretary is responsible. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I beg to second, and urge members to support this, because the committee has done a very good job, Mr. Speaker, and having done a very good job, there are matters which may be clerical and may escape attention, and that's why we have an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, and amendments to clarify them. No one is escaping from liability. No one is escaping from liability, but the amendment is saying accounting officer during the year, so that the particular accounting officer will still be found, Mr. Speaker. I thank you, and I second.
Other members, I have to propose a question. Then we make progress. Honorable members, you remember I had headed putting the question on the amendment by Honorable Ichung'wa earlier, and so that then we move in a tidy way, I would like to put that question particularly. Then we get to the next. So I'll be putting the question on the amendment by Honorable Ichung'wa. Other members, of course, I couldn't put the question earlier for obvious reasons, and that has been confirmed. Honorable members, I put the question that the motion be amended by inserting the following immediately after the words November 14th, 2018, subject to 1, deletion of recommendation number 2 appearing on page 18 under paragraph 4, pending bills, and substituting therefore the following. The accounting officer, Dr. Kamau Dhuge, put in place measures to forestall the accumulation of pending bills at the National Treasury, contrary to the provisions of Section 12(2)(b) of the Public Finance Management Act 2012, which mandates the National Treasury to ensure proper management and control of and accounting for the finances of the national government and its entities in order to promote the efficient and effective use of budgetary resources at the national level. 2, deletion of the committee recommendation under paragraph 5, outstanding interest, appearing on page 19 of the report, and substituting therefore the following. The accounting officer, Dr. Kamau Dhuge, put in place measures to manage interests and ensure outstanding interests are surrendered on time in line with the provisions of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and Regulation 93 of the Public Finance Management National Government Regulations 2015. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honorable members, that is carried. The one by Honorable Ichung'wa. The one that now we are dealing with that has been proposed and seconded is the one by Honorable Owen Bayer. And so I wish to propose a question that the motion be amended by inserting the following immediately after the words November 14th, 2018, subject to deletion of the recommendation appearing under paragraph 243, item number 2 on page 277 of the report, and substituting therefore the following. The accounting officer during the year under review be reprimanded by introducing a new criterion during evaluation and comparison of tenders and proceeding to cancel the tender for lowest bid, contrary to Section 66(2) of the Public Procurement and Disposal Act 2005 and Section 74(4)(a) of the Public Finance Management Act 2012. Honorable members, allow me to allow me to give one or two, particularly those that haven't spoken. Very well, Honorable Pio.
Mr. Speaker, from the outset, I want to oppose this amendment, and very, very strongly. Mr. Speaker, the report you are seeing before us today has taken us months and lots of energy, lots of money, lots of resources to put it together. So by trying to mutilate it in the manner we are attempting is to belittle the work of the committee, something I will not support. Mr. Speaker, to clarify further, when we say an officer should be reprimanded, what we mean is that this House is the one reprimanding him or her. That is one. And in fact, by reprimanding the officer, this House is actually indicting them for avoidance of doubt. But coming back to the issue, Mr. Speaker, in our line of examination, in our line of questioning these our witnesses who come before us, the first clarification we seek from the substantive accounting officers is who was in office at the time this transaction was happening. That is our standard line of questioning. And when we asked that question, the answer was clear and categorical, that the accounting officer at the time this contract was being signed, was being executed, was one Dr. Monica Juma. That's a fact, and the Hansard can bear as witness. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, our committee relies on facts as laid before us. What we have suggested and recommended is that this accounting officer who was in office then, from the records we have, and in fact we went further and inquired from the National Treasury, because it is the National Treasury that appoints accounting officers. When we sought the clarification from the National Treasury on who were the accounting officers in these respective years, the answer was clear that the accounting officer for the Interior was Monica Juma. Mr. Speaker, we went further and called all these people. Those who came, those who didn't come. But the fact of the matter is that these people have got a chance, they've got a chance to defend themselves even after this. They can go to court. They can go to any other record. Yes, but as a committee, we have done our work, and I want to urge my colleagues that we don't give chance for this amendment to pass. Because if it does pass, we shall have set a very dangerous precedent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I will certainly come back this way, but let's hear from Koi Waruke.
Mr. Speaker, I concur with the chair, because let me give myself as an example. I was the other day in court, and it is just about the same. Corruption is corruption, Mr. Speaker, and there's no way that it can be divided to something else. I support the chair.
Which chair? Is it the chair of Opio? You very well. Now we no, you cannot guide me who to give. But Honorable Malwa looks completely agitated on this one, and we just get one or two others, then we make progress. Honorable Malwa.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Parliament has powers. It can veto even a committee report. We need to start from there. As Parliament, of course, when a matter has come, we give all the trust to our respective committees, Mr. Speaker. And the matter that Honorable Member for Kilifi has raised, it is indeed a very important issue, Mr. Speaker. We cannot just wish it away. But my humble request, Mr. Speaker, because all these were PSS, it's in the records, and obviously we expect the committee to have interrogated, to be able to know who was the PS at that particular time. Mr. Speaker, I'm humbly requesting Honorable Bayer, because it's actually a genuine concern. If he has that evidence, and you know this is a house of records, so that he can be able to table that evidence, because it will be very wrong to reprimand Honorable Dr. Juma, and yet she's not the one who did this, if at all it was Honorable Iringo. Because this is a house of records. So please, Honorable Bayer, because I empathize with the situation. It will be very wrong to sacrifice somebody who never did the mistake. So please, humbly, you can be able to submit the evidence that he has. No, before the House now. It's not the committee. No, he can table. He can table it to the Speaker. The Speaker can be able to look into that. Then the House can veto the committee report. So I'm humbly requesting, Honorable Baya, so that you have that evidence to table before the House. I thank you.
Very well. Why don't we consider, Honorable Gwenye, I can see you, but why don't we consider that end? Honorable Atandi, we shall come this way.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the onset, I want to say that I oppose the amendment by the Honorable Owen Baya. Mr. Speaker, Public Accounts Committee has done a very good report. And I want to reiterate that, Mr. Speaker, if we begin to mutilate this report in the manner that we are going, Mr. Speaker, we are going to be ashamed. And, Mr. Speaker, the amendment that has been proposed by Honorable Baya appears to portray us as gatekeeping for some corrupt public servants. Because the committee has clearly explained the PS who was in charge when this error occurred. And, Mr. Speaker, as a House, we are trying to remove her name. Are we saying, Mr. Speaker, that we are absconding our role as people oversighting the executive? So, Mr. Speaker, what I want to say is very simple. That, Mr. Speaker, I want to plead with our colleagues not to allow any further amendments to this report. In fact, Mr. Speaker, let us all reject the amendments so that this Public Accounts Committee report can be intact and it can be used to oversight the executive as it has been done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Angwenye, have come to your side. Honorable Jimmy Angwenye, have come to your side. You said your side.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me a chance to contribute this motion. First, I congratulate Public Accounts Committee for a work well done. I've not seen a report of this size and this detail for a long time, and I've been here for long. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure, unless it can be confirmed, I'm sure that the Public Accounts Committee called all these people who are involved in these cases to explain to them, to explain to the committee what they did. And I'm sure the accounting officer, Juma, must have been called to that committee to go and explain. Unless you can prove that this report was done without calling these people to come and account for their frauds, Mr. Speaker, we should not make that amendment which is being sought by Honorable Mbaya. Mr. Speaker, again, this is work which has taken a long time. And even if she's remanded wrongly, there's next stage, she can go and explain to herself and she'll be relieved. So, Mr. Speaker, I would urge the House to pass, to approve that amendment being made by Honorable Mbaya.
Very well, very well. You know, Honorable Badi, when you say 1 minute, and you, please take you half a minute, then I get at least one more person.
Yes.
And then we make progress.
Mr. Speaker, we can amend the PAC report, but we have to be really convinced why we are amending it. In fact, PAC and PIC reports are amended based on the report itself. If there was any information here which is being contradicted by recommendation, then we amend the report. But, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Owen Baya has failed the basic test of just tabling the proof that Monica Juma was not the accounting officer. But you cannot ask us to be too general. When we are recommending reprimand, prosecution, holding someone to accountable, you must be specific on the officer. You must mention the name. You cannot be general. So, Mr. Speaker, we need to reject this amendment and try to reject all the other amendments, because otherwise this report, which has taken this committee so long, will be watered.
two members only, and we have to close this. Honorable Moshiri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to add my voice on this report of PAC.
Order Moshiri, not the report. It is specifically on the amendment.
Yeah, to the amendment, Mr. Speaker. If we allow some members to bring amendments on the floor of the House when some people are indicted, whether they are from your fringe, whether they are your friends, we should oppose it and use the mighty of this House to bring to the book to those people who have committed economic crimes to this nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And
Chair, the Speaker, thank you. The PAC committee has spent a lot of time on this matter. They've put in a lot of work, and a member cannot come and now take us to vagueness. You know what we are looking at here is you're moving us from specificity to an arena of vagueness, and that is not what we have come here to do. We cannot be gatekeepers. We cannot be protecting people we cannot be sending our committees to do work and coming here to dilute it. I oppose this amendment, and you know, Mr. Speaker, Monica Juma might not have been the accounting officer at the time of signing, but who paid for this contract? Who was the accounting officer at the time of payment? And this is the person that must be indicted. And Mr. Speaker, I oppose Owen Bayer's amendment. I support the position of PAC. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, on that one, we really must make progress, honorable members. Remember, honorable members, we are just dealing with amendments. The body, the real report is still to come. Now, honorable members, on that, I'll putting the question on that. I'll put it in an appropriate time. I now call Honorable Daniel Maanzo to move the other amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm moving that the motion be amended by inserting the following immediately after the words November 2014, subject to deletion of recommendation number 1 under committee recommendation on under paragraph 375, retention of funds.
Order. What is your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, I thought we were on Bayer's amendment and we have not voted on it. We can't move to another amendment.
Honorable Body, I've just said I'll put the question at an appropriate time because there has to be a minimum threshold. Order, members. We shall secure a threshold, and after that we'll put the question because the House must proceed.
Thank you.
Honorable Manzo.
Under this recommendation, Mr. Speaker, if you go to the report, there are 2 recommendations in the report. And under second recommendation, which remains, Mr. Speaker, the matter is still under investigation by ESCC, and we are not doing away with ESCC at all, Mr. Speaker. But when it comes to issue of retention of funds and the issue of a road that was made, Mr. Speaker, there's a need just to make sure, and that's why, just like Honorable Juneta have requested, a further, within 3 months, clarification and a further audit. In the case of roads, ordinarily what happens is the road must be shown. The auditors must be shown the road. If it is a case of retention of funds, these funds are usually retained. Once a contractor completes the road, then that's the time that amount of money is retained. So it's a technical issue. I want to say that the committee has done a very good job. And this report is a great report, Mr. Speaker. But in the event they are clerical, issues, Mr. Speaker, or in the event you need to further clarify, this matter is still within the reach of this House. And whoever is culpable or is liable will not escape from it, Mr. Speaker. And that is the spirit under which I brought these amendments, so that within 3 months the road be shown, the completion be re-inspected, and a report be brought to this House. So that if the road was done and it exists, then there's no need to do that, because in engineering it is a slightly different regime. And further to that amendment, Mr. Speaker, on page 457 of the same, on my second amendment, is a deletion. And in that particular second amendment, we ask the Auditor General also, within 3 months, to counter check and to make sure. And in both recommendations, if you see number 1 and number 2, ESCC is still on record. So we are not removing ESCC at all. We are not removing ESCC, and we are not removing this house from managing this matter. We are saying this house be provided, the committee be provided with further information, showing on engineering basis that this road was really done or it was not done. And on retention, that whether it was released at the right time after all the engineering quotations have been qualified. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and ask the Honorable Buyer to second me.
Honorable Buyer.
Honorable Isugwa. Let me ask Honorable Isugwa because of finance. Let me ask Honorable Isugwa. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Chair, thank you, and I rise to second that amendment by Honorable Manzo. And I want to say, Honorable Chair, just like we have just done with the support that we gave to the Junet amendment, it is just a similar amendment to that of Junet, that we are not saying exonerating anybody, but we are only saying that, just as I said yesterday, or as I contributed in support of the amendment by Honorable Junet, even in normal audit processes, leave alone now this that has already been reviewed by PAC. In normal corporate audit processes, once a question has been raised by an auditor, in the subsequent financial year, the auditor goes back to check. And therefore, since this report is for a particular financial year, it is only right that we send it back to the auditor so that within 3 months after adoption of this report, the auditor goes back to confirm the facts. And I want to agree with Honorable Manzo that we are not in any way exonerating anybody like the attempt that was there with the Buyer amendment. That this one is specific, that if, following the further audit by the auditor, if the auditor finds that nothing has been done, then the same report will go back to the same committee, and the committee will report back to this House. I therefore support and second that amendment.
Other members, I will... Honorable Agwenyi, I can't put the question before I have proposed it. So, honorable members, I propose a question that the motion be amended by inserting the following immediately after the words November 14, 2018, subject to 1, deletion of recommendation number 1 under committee recommendation under paragraph 375.1, retention of refunds, Kenya shillings 881,398,162.91 cents on page 466 of the report, and substituting thereof the following. The Auditor General to, within 3 months after the adoption of this report, undertake an audit into the payments of Kenya shillings 292,060,779 cents and Kenya shillings 100,372,341.65 cents for financial year 2013-2014 and financial year 2014-2015 respectively, totaling Kenya shillings 392,433,121.16 cents, made by the then accounting officer engineer John K. Mosonik without original receipts. The Auditor General should also undertake a further audit into refunds totaling Kenya shillings 55,450,449.02 cents in financial year 2014-2015, paid by the then accounting officer to contractors without proof of completion of works contrary to the Public Finance Management Act 2012, and 2, deletion of recommendation number 1 under committee recommendations under paragraph 375.2 and resolved issues for deposits account for 2013 for 2012-2013 and earlier years on page 467 of the report, and substituting therefore the following. The Auditor General to, within 3 months after the adoption of this report, undertake a further audit regarding a statement of assets and liabilities under deposits for the former Ministry of Roads, submitted by the then accounting officer, Engineer John K. Mosonik, that was still reflecting the debt and credit balances relating to the financial year 2012, 2013, and earlier years, which besides being uncleared for a long time, had remained unanalyzed and unsupported as at 30th June 2016. Honorable members, is that the mood of the House? Yes. Very well. Very well. I think we're, in that case, honorable members, because we have the requisite. Honorable Buddy, you know, I have to read the whole of it. That is how it should be. Honorable members, so that then we move in a tidy way, allow me to go back to the earlier one by Honorable Owen Bayer, and then the next one by Honorable Daniel Maanzo. The first one is the amendment by Honorable Owen Bayer. Honorable members, I put the question that the motion be amended by inserting the following immediately after the words November 14, 2018, subject to deletion of the recommendation appearing under paragraph 243, item number 2 on page 277 of the report, and substituting therefore with the following. The accounting officer during the year under review be reprimanded by introducing a new criterion during evaluation and comparison of tenders and proceeding to cancel the tender for lowest bid contrary to section 66(2) of the Public Procurement and Disposal Act 2005 and section 74(4) A of the Public Finance Management Act 2012. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The nays have it. Honorable members, the next amendment is order members, the next amendment is by Honorable Daniel Maanzo. Honorable members, I put order members, I put the question that the motion be amended by inserting the following immediately after the words November 14th, 2018, subject to deletion of recommendation number 1 under committee recommendations on page under paragraph 375(1), retention of refunds, Kenya shillings 881,398,162.81 on page 466 of the report, and substituting therefore the following. The Auditor General, to within 3 months after adoption of this report, undertake an audit into the payments of Kenya shillings 260,779.51 and Kenya shillings 100,372,341.65 for financial year 2013-2014 and financial year 2014-2015 respectively, totaling Kenya shillings 392,433,161.16 made by the then accounting officer, Engineer John K. Mosonik, without original receipts. The Auditor General should also undertake a further audit into refunds totaling Kenya shillings 55,450,449.02 in financial year 2014-2015 paid by the then accounting officer to contractors without proof of completion of works contrary to the Public Finance Management Act 2012, and 2, deletion of recommendation number 1 under committee recommendations under paragraph 375.2 and resolved issues for deposits account for 2012, 2013 and earlier years on page 467 of the report, and substituting therefore the following. The Auditor General, to within 3 months after the adoption of this report, undertake a further audit regarding a statement of assets and liabilities under deposits for the former Ministry of Roads, submitted by the then accounting officer, Engineer John K. Mosonik, that was still reflecting the debt and credit balances relating to the financial year 2012, 2013 and earlier years, which besides being uncleared for a long time, had remained unanalyzed and unsupported as at 30th June 2016. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? Nay. The ayes have it. Honorable members, effectively, what that means is that all the amendments have been disposed of, and now we are reverting to the committee report as amended. So the members that contribute now who should have that in mind. The first to go on that is the majority leader.
Chair, Mr. Speaker, I want the chairman of Public Accounts Committee to be in the House. Chair, I want the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee or the vice chair to be in the House. We cannot procedurally, we cannot debate a report. Yeah. But Mr. Speaker, let me stand to support this report. The vice chair is around, so I have no problem.
Going to record.
The vice chair is around.
Yes, thank you for...
The able vice chair of the Public Accounts Committee, Honorable Jessica Mbalu, is in the House.
Don't preempt what she is to inform you. What do you want information to Majority Leader?
Yes, I just want to assure him that I am here to represent the Public Accounts Committee, and I'm very happy to see the able vice chairperson, which I am. So the committee is well represented. Thank you for the concerns of the leader of majority. He's always talk about the chairpersons or the committee being represented. Leader, you are in order.
Very well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to support the report on the examination of the report of the Auditor General on the financial statements for the national government for the financial year that ended 30th June 2015. Mr. Speaker, let me make it very clear that the adoption of this report by the House is very, very important to a number of Kenyans, more so in the counties, and those who access CDF funds. Because for this House to deal with the Division of Revenue Bill next year, then they will use the last audited accounts. And I am happy, Honorable Wandai and his vice chair and the team at least have dealt with, and I know by June next year or May, they will also bring the report for 2015-2016. Mr. Speaker, I have been around here for some time. And I hope what I saw this morning will never happen again. That the Public Accounts Committee report or the Public Investment Audited reports are reports that are prepared based on the constitutional provisions and the standing orders and the PFM Act, that the committee look at evidence, the committee look at statements of accounts, that the committee look at the reports from the Auditor General based on the management letters that he sends to accounting officers. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, if you look at Article 2265 of the Constitution, and if you allow me, I'll read. It says, if the holder of a public office, including political office, directs or approves the use of public funds contrary to law or instructions, that person is liable for any loss arising from the use and shall make good the loss whether the person remains the holder of the office or not. Regardless, even those of us who are in political office, the moment you violate Article 2256 of the Constitution, in as far as managing public resources, you must be indicted. And Mr. Speaker, if you look at Section 74(2) of the PFM Act, it says if a cabinet secretary responsible believes that an accounting officer is engaging in or has engaged in improper conduct within the meaning of subsection 4, the Cabinet Secretary shall take measures as may be provided in regulations. So even Cabinet Secretaries who oversee accounting officers have a responsibility in law to make sure that resources are resources of the people of Kenya are not used for personal gain. Mr. Speaker, the Public Accounts Committee report of 2014-2015, as I said, is important to the county governments. It's important because the same audited accounts will be used when we develop the Division of Revenue Bill next year. But Mr. Speaker, if you go to page 18 of this report, and this was the one that concerned the permanent secretary or the principal accounting officer, Kamau Thuge, it has recommended that Kamau Thuge should be reprimanded for accumulating pending bills. Mr. Speaker, pending bills is a cancer, not only to the national government, but even to the county governments. And I think this House is under obligation that we must come with a relevant legislation and budgetary provisions to deal with the pending bills. Who owe these pending bills? These are Kenyans, these are business people. If they have not provided goods and services, then they should be told that you have no money pending with government. If they have provided the required goods and services, Mr. Speaker, government, either at the national or at the county level, is under obligation to pay those Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Office of the Auditor General. Every time the House has asked the Auditor General to do either forensic audit or to provide the necessary audited reports, the Auditor General, Mr. Ouko, has risen to the occasion and has provided either forensic audit or the normal audit. But if you look at the various parastatals who have been indicted in this report, and I'll look at the failure by government to repay its loans. Mr. Speaker, the total outstanding loans balance is 196 billion, reflected in the consolidated statement of outstanding of loans as of 30th June 2015. These loans include amount to Kenya shillings 21 billion issued to 31 institutions. However, these institutions have not made any effort to repay their respective loans upon maturity as shown. AFC, Mr. Speaker, has a loan of 505 million. You go down, you have got Cooperative Bank, Coffee Board of Kenya, Cotton Limited, Eldoret Municipal Council, Halal Meat Products, ICDC, Kenya Power Lighting, 312, Kenya Urban Transport, Local Government Loans Authority, Miwani Sugar Factory, Mumias Sugar Outgrowers, 3 billion, National Water Conservation and Pipeline. Name them, over 35 government institutions or a cumulative loan of 196 billion. We need to clear our books, and those institutions must adhere to the PFM Act. The accounting officers should also ensure that they prepare and submit a report on the status of the repayment. So Parliament is recommending that before the committee starts the 15-16, they must provide a status report on how they will pay this. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very important. And I said yesterday, the Public Accounts Committee and the Public Investment Committee contribute 80% of the oversight that the Constitution has given to us. So if you come and you want to amend this report just because your villager, your relative was named, Mr. Speaker, then the essence of that oversight role you are given to as a member of parliament supersedes. So we must all of us together prepare to oversight and protect the resources allocated by this House to the people of Kenya, either at the county level or at the national level. With those many remarks, I beg to support.
Let's have Honorable Makari Mulu.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to join other members of Parliament in thanking this committee, the Public Accounts Committee, which has actually done a very good job. I've taken time to look at this report. And reading through the report, despite being very voluminous, Mr. Speaker, there are very important findings in this report. And while the report is very good and the committee has done a good job, Mr. Speaker, what I'll call the most disturbing thing, Mr. Speaker, is that when you look at the recommendations of this committee, and for some of us who have been in this House for now over 5 years, who have looked into earlier reports, also PAC reports, the most disturbing thing, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that these recommendations are with us as a House, year in, year out. And to me, the question I ask myself is it that the so-called accounting officers of this country don't learn from lessons learned? And the other question is, Mr. Speaker, to what extent is the Auditor General, in terms of frustration, to what extent is it frustrated? Because it is very frustrating, Mr. Speaker, you do a report this year, you write the same recommendations, you do another report, Mr. Speaker, the next year, you do the same recommendations. So I see a level of frustrations, Mr. Speaker, a very high level of frustration from this particular office of the Auditor General. Because it's like whatever recommendations is given, Mr. Speaker, are not being addressed. And that worries me as a Kenyan, and it worries me as a member of Parliament. And Mr. Speaker, even before I give my comments, I think as a House, and I've said this many times, we really need to think seriously. How do we take up these recommendations after we approve these reports? What do we do with these recommendations? And I don't know that it's the work of the implementation committee, or it should be the work of the whole House in terms of way forward. Because, Mr. Speaker, unless we craft a very clear way forward, it is just going to continue being a waste of time and a waste of precious time of this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, let me just look at some of the recommendations and make my input into them. Mr. Speaker, the issue of budget under expenditure. Every year, Mr. Speaker, we spend a lot of time in this House discussing the budgets, which is normally an estimation of what should be spent, so that we realize most of our economic indicators in terms of economic growth, in terms of employment levels. And anytime, Mr. Speaker, you see that the budget has not been spent, that sends a very clear message, Mr. Speaker, that then we cannot be able to achieve what we had planned to achieve in terms of economic growth, in terms of employment, and other important macroeconomic variables, Mr. Speaker. And when you look at the reasons, Mr. Speaker, I just want to focus on the reasons why we are not able to spend the budget as planned. The reasons that as stated here is the issue of exchequer issues. That most of these MDAs, even though we say we'll give you money to do work between these 12 months, they are not able to get the actual money, the cash, to do the work. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of delayed disbursement of donor funds. That donors who we have come to agreement with them that they will fund these particular projects, they are not able to give the money in good time. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of IFMIS. Systematic challenges with IFMIS. And I'll come to IFMIS later, Mr. Speaker. And the last one is challenges in implementation of procurement laws and procedures. Now, Mr. Speaker, you ask yourself, if we have any challenges in procurement, laws and procedures, it is this House which makes laws. How come that this required amendments to this law so that we're able to move faster, How come they are not being brought to this house and we fast track them so that we get things being done as planned, Mr. Speaker? So, Mr. Speaker, to me, when you look at some of these reasons why we are not spending the budget, there are things which are at an administrative level, which can be sorted out at administrative level. And it is high time, Mr. Speaker, we choose between having a realistic budget and a budget which is just there for the sake of being there. You know, Mr. Speaker, anytime you talk to anybody in this country, they say, a budget of Tanzania and Uganda combined is less than Kenyan budget. The issue, Mr. Speaker, is not about the volume of our budgets. It's not about the size of our budget. It is about implementing the budget. And unless we are implementing, we are wasting our time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the issue of impress, I said earlier. To me, I think, Mr. Speaker, this issue of unsurrendered impress, this country, we have to change our position on unsurrendered impress. And I said, anytime you travel, you come back, requirement is 48 hours, you surrender impress. And I said earlier, the Controller General gives ministries 3 months to prepare their accounts. After 3 months, Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General comes in and takes 3 months to analyze the accounts. We are talking about a period of about 6 months after the year closes. And after 6 months, Mr. Speaker, we are still talking about unsurrendered impress. And then we have the courtesy to stand in this house and say, I took the impress when the year was closing, and because the year was closing, I couldn't surrender my impress. That's rubbish, Mr. Speaker. I think we need, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that if you travel and you come back, and you are traveling on government resources, you surrender impress as required by the law. And if you are not able to surrender impress, Mr. Speaker, your salary is either attached or the money is recovered from whatever source the government thinks fit to recover that money. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense when I see unsurrendered impress. The issue of pending bills, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, the other day, we visited the industrial area prisons as a committee. And when we went there, Mr. Speaker, one of the very surprising things, actually the thing which made us get shocked like a committee, we realized, Mr. Speaker, we have about 30,000 people, remandees, who have not been taken to court and sentenced or released. And the statistics we got, Mr. Speaker, is about each of these people spend about 270 shillings per day for their upkeep. Mr. Speaker, if you multiply 270 shillings times 30,000 remandees, it means this country is spending 8 million every day keeping people in remandees which have not been sentenced, which have not been taken to court, and which, really, when you consider some of the offenses, Mr. Speaker, are not worthy being that remand. Somebody was arrested by traffic police, hanging on a matatu. He is there eating 270 shillings every day. He has been there 3 months, Mr. Speaker. He has not been taken to court. And we say we are serious as a country. If we have to be serious, Mr. Speaker, the Constitution demands prudent use of resources. And we can only be prudent in the use of resources, Mr. Speaker, if some of these small bits, we address them and we get rid of them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, because I don't have much time, I just want to focus on the key ones. Before then, Mr. Speaker, I'm able to allow other members to contribute. Mr. Speaker, let me revisit the issue of IFMIS. Mr. Speaker, IFMIS has been in this country for quite a number of years now. And as a member of the Budget Committee, I remember we give money to IFMIS, either improvement or engineering, whatever they call it, Mr. Speaker. And the fun bit, and from what I'm seeing this report, Mr. Speaker, is that despite all these resources this government has put into this system, the system is still having some shortcomings. And I ask myself, if you try to fix a system for more than 10 years, and it is not giving you results, is it not the time to think about doing away with that system and think of another system which is more efficient? And always the last resort, Mr. Speaker, in such a situation is, if a system cannot work then, we go back to manual systems, so long as they're able to deliver. So many excuses have been given as a result of this IFMIS system. So many excuses, Mr. Speaker. Anytime you talk to anybody, excuses IFMIS. Every MDA excuses IFMIS. I think we are tired of this system called IFMIS. It's either we get it done or we do away with it and get another system. Mr. Speaker, the last point is, these are just because of the time. I looked at the recommendation, Mr. Speaker. There's a recommendation that the Auditor General needs to give a letter authorizing accounting officers to be appointed. I think, Mr. Speaker, from a financial perspective, this doesn't make sense. It is this house which vets accounting officers. And if somebody is not up to, doesn't meet the deal, Mr. Speaker, then we need as a house to stop from approving them before they are appointed. We'll be having the kind of, that is constitutional. So let's not really let our constitutional mandate be taken by other offices, because we can do that at this, as we debate in this house. So with those remarks, Mr. Speaker, so much I would have said, but because of time, I agree that I...
Very well, very well. Honorable General, before I come to your side, I must cross this side of mine, my right hand side. Honorable Mutunga.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the adoption of this report. Honorable Speaker, I wish to thank the committee for a job very well done. This report is massive, but Honorable Speaker, you don't have to be an accountant to understand the content of this report. Having looked through parts of this report, I cannot cheat that I've done a comprehensive review. I have a few things that probably I would like to say, which are important in this particular respect. Honorable Speaker, the issue of IFMIS has been lingering on for a long time as a problem. And we are wondering whether it is the levels of financing of the processes that lead to making it a perfect means to use for purposes of enabling us to have an efficient accounting system, or what the problem is, because Kenyan government cannot claim not to have enough money. We do not know whether this lack of technology that should be, that we do not have, because we can even have technology borrowed or bought from other places. So it's a challenge as a country to be talking about IFMIS so many times and being given as a reason why efficiency and effectiveness is not adopted across the board in terms of the finance management of this country. So, Mr. Speaker, we have no excuse. I think what we need is to have a perfectly working system, a management system that is going to help us to move on. Honorable Speaker, the Constitution provision provides that we have an audited account, and the specifications in terms of time are given. So much so as stipulated in the PFMA of 2012. A compilation of this report is important, and therefore the need for us to look at it as a parliament and make the necessary comments. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy and delighted this morning for the discussions that have gone through this House, and especially when we are looking at the amendments. And I wish to commend the members of Parliament for the way they have looked at the amendments today. I look at it with a lot of nostalgia, because I was part of the team that did scrutinize the sugar issue. I wish this kind of mood prevailed on that day, because we would basically have had that report adopted. Mr. Speaker, the report basically, the amendments clearly puts people, specific individuals into question for them to be able to come up clearly and they exonerate themselves. Honorable Speaker, looking at the report, it is important for us to adopt this report because it has come up with important recommendations that are going to help us move forward in a more concise way. Looking at the pending bills, Honorable Speaker, as a country, we need to ask ourselves why ministries and other spending centers do not actually prioritize paying pending bills. Why does it happen? And it's item number one in terms of what should be funded at the beginning of a financial year. What is the problem? And this is by law and the Constitution. If the Constitution so provides that pending bills needs to be taken care of, why is it not adhered to? Why don't we have pending bills addressed? Because, Mr. Speaker, if you look at who is actually owed these bills, some of them are our contractors, are Kenyans, and others who have participated in the development of this country. And once we take money from them for a very long time, it means we are impeding their performance. And therefore, we may be dragging them back instead of promoting their businesses and enabling them to become better people. Honorable Speaker, the recommendations of this committee have also specified actions on the various individuals who are supposed to act. But one of the issues that I may wish to bring to the House is who actually acts on these recommendations. If it is the Committee on Implementation, how much has this committee been doing so that we may also have reports that show us the progress that we are making as a country in terms of covering distance, to ensure that we are able to address some of the issues that are raised by the public accounts, by the Auditor General and other issues that are raised in various fronts. The idea is that we need to have some of these issues resolved so that we may be able to move forward in a more responsible manner. Honorable Speaker, it is important for us, for us as a country and for the accounting officers to be a lot more responsible. If you look at this report, there are quite a number of areas where issues are still pending. Several years down the line, issues are still pending. Then you wonder, when will these issues be addressed? What will be the trigger mechanism to ensure that appropriate actions are taken? Responsibilities must be taken. When the Auditor General issues a management letter, to what extent are these letters addressed? And I'm sure the committee has looked at all this, they have looked at the details, and I wish to commend the committee, Honorable Speaker, even as I support, that they have done a good job, and they have highlighted the core concerns that needs to be raised for the various cost centers to be able to move in tandem with the requirements of the law and the requirement of the Constitution of this country. Mr. Speaker, I support the adoption.
The Honorable Unit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to support the report of the Public Accounts Committee. On the onset, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate...
The Honorable Unit, just one moment. Yeah. You had spoken to this particular motion?
No. I only moved an amendment.
I am advised that when you speak to an amendment to the motion that you have spoken to the motion.
No, Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking to the motion now as amended because the amendment was just carried today. If the amendment had failed,
just 1 minute. The Honorable Unit, I am advised that when you propose a motion, you are the main proponent of the motion, of the amendment to the motion. It is presumed that you are speaking to the motion. That is the presumption. That when you are the one who's proposing to amend, you are speaking to the motion itself. But those members now who speak to your proposed amendment, either supporting or adversely or negating it, they only speak strictly to the proposed amendment. So it is then presumed that the mover of the amendment has spoken to the motion itself. Point of order, on a point of order, the Honorable. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I stand guided, but my amendment was speaking to a specific matter in the report. It was not speaking to the general report. The report carries many things, which I want to speak to now. But I was speaking to an amendment that was affecting a small, very minute part of the report, Mr. Speaker. So do I lose my rights to speak on the other matters just because I amended one small portion of the report? Does that make, and there are many members who spoke on the same amendment, Mr. Speaker. Will they also lose their chance of speaking on the report?
The Honorable Unit, that what you're saying would carries currency with me, because when you propose to amend, then you are seeking to amend probably an I or a comma or something like that. And this is a voluminous report. The rule would seem to be unfair to your situation, but I'm told that those are the rules that we operate under. So I would kindly ask you to just hold your horses. We'll seek clarity on it. If we don't close this, probably we'll give you another opportunity. Your position carries favor with me, but the rules are what they are, and I'll seek clarification later on. Very well, the Honorable Unit. We shall have the Honorable Ole Sankok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker,
I stand to support this report of the Public Accounts Committee. Honorable Speaker, this report is surely very big, but I've gone through it and noticed a few things, Honorable Speaker, that are very good for this country. Honorable Speaker, the Auditor General have been doing a good job as far as auditing accounts of the government are concerned, both county governments and national government. Honorable Speaker, but the implementation part of it is have been the problem, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, if this House can think of probably even giving teeth to the Auditor General, so that, Honorable Speaker, the Auditor General will have some powers to track all the monies that are transferred in all levels of government, either county government or national government, even parastatal ministries and departments of and agencies of the government. Honorable Speaker, I think the Auditor General will be empowered to do even more, because at the moment, what we are seeing from this report is a total audit of all government agencies, government ministries, and departments. Honorable Speaker, the House must come together and support PSC, Honorable Speaker, and again, support the Auditor General. And whenever there is this issue of audit queries, Honorable Speaker, let us not be quick to see the person first who have an audit query. Let us not see the officer. Let us see the money that the government is losing. Because the problem that we have, even when these audit queries come to this House, and the Honorable Leader of Majority had just alluded that at times even those who are facing great economic, let me say in quote, crimes, have come to this House, and this House have vetted them and have given them jobs, yet from where they came from, they had audit queries concerning public fund. Honorable Speaker, we need to give our Auditor General confidence, and the only thing that when we give, the only way we can give him confidence is by making sure that we don't have this ethnic connotation whenever there is audit queries on particular individuals. Because, Honorable Speaker, a thief is a thief. A thief has no name of a clan, does not carry the name of a religion, does not carry a name of a region. He carries a particular name, and that name is known. So whenever that name appears in this House, Honorable Speaker, we can only give confidence to the Auditor General if we do support. Honorable Speaker, I'm at times worried of all these voluminous reports that seems very nice. But Honorable Speaker, the citizens of this country know very well the massive loss of public funds, from the county government to the national government. We know how much we have lost in NYS. We know how much we have lost in county governments. We know the shoddy jobs and contracts that have been done in county government and ended up being a conduit to massive loss of funds. But Honorable Speaker, when again we see these audited reports, at times a clean bill of health is given to a county government that even a layman understand that it should not have that clean bill of health. Honorable Speaker, we also want the Auditor General to be a bit firm on some of this report. Honorable Speaker, again, we also need to advise our Auditor General. At times we see some audit queries that may not hold some water. So we need to have a watertight kind of audit report so that we don't also scare away investors. Because whenever then there are audit queries that don't hold water, we will see as if there is a massive loss of public funds, and we will scare away investors and donors, and sometimes these audit queries are solved with time, but to gain again that confidence it will become a problem. So, Honorable Speaker, on my part, I totally support the Public Accounts Committee report, and I urge all members of this House to support and to read it. You know, supporting and reading it are two different things. I may not be an accountant, but at least I can pick a few things when I read this report. Honorable Speaker, members should be going with this report home and read it, so that when we come and support, at least we have some facts to support. And when we want to correct, then we have facts of correcting, so that we make it even more better. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Very good contribution, the Honorable Sankok. We shall now have the Honorable Atandi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to ventilate on this report. And Mr. Speaker, from the word go, I would like to congratulate the committee, the PSC committee, led by the EBU chairman, Honorable Pio Andai, for this great work that they've done. Mr. Speaker, this report is very fundamental for us because, as you're aware, the Division of Revenue Bill relies heavily on this report. And county governments have accused us of not finalizing the various audits of government financial reports to facilitate more resources going to our counties. And Mr. Speaker, I want to applaud the committee because with the manner they've begun, I think in the next few years, Mr. Speaker, we will be able to finalize most of the pending audits. Mr. Speaker, looking at this report, because I've gone through it, a few issues have come up. One, Mr. Speaker, there is what I call under expenditure that has come out clearly in this report. Mr. Speaker, you find that under expenditure occurs because the untimely release of exchequer. Mr. Speaker, in all government operations, when you go to ministries, you go to, even here in National Assembly, in most cases, the resources are not released in time. The exchequer does not come in time. And this under expenditure has caused delay in implementation of various programs. And most of these programs have to be carried over to the successive financial years. Mr. Speaker, I think this is very important that the committee has noted this one, and they have given out very good recommendations on what Treasury needs to do in the future. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, that is very clear in this report is that there still exists weak internal controls in government. Mr. Speaker, despite the existence of the much-touted IFMIS, government financial operations are still largely manual. Mr. Speaker, this is reflected in the number of errors and irregularities that have been captured here. In every ministry, there are errors that have been detected, there are irregularities. Mr. Speaker, a lot of operations of government are still manual, and this is the reason why, Mr. Speaker, if you look at this report, you find that a lot of ministries are setting up ad hoc committees to look at certain operations that are not matching. You know, revenues that are not matching, expenditures are not matching revenues. So, Mr. Speaker, I think in this stage, we really need to ensure that we minimize manual government operations. This is very important for proper financial management of our economy. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, that has also come out, which is tied to corruption, Mr. Speaker, is that there are so many unsupported payments that continue to be done in the various government agencies and ministries. Mr. Speaker, there are many examples of payments that were done and there are no vouchers, there were no receipts, even there were no supportive documents. Mr. Speaker, this is very serious because this is really at the heart of corruption in government. And I'm happy that the committee has made very decisive recommendations, which some members have tried to water down through various amendments that I've gone through. I am thankful to the committee because of holding the accounting officers accountable, reprimanding the accounting officers. Mr. Speaker, this is very fundamental because this House must have a voice And because we are oversighting the executive, we must be able to properly reprimand accounting officers. Mr. Speaker, the other issue that I have been able to observe in this report is that, Mr. Speaker, the report, the committee has recommended decisive measures that should be undertaken by various agencies. One of the agencies that has been given a lot of prominence in this report is the agency known as EACC, the so-called the Anti-Corruption Commission. Mr. Speaker, I have gone through this report and I have made an observation which I wanted to read, Mr. Speaker. If you go to the report on page 466, the recommendations by the committee on the financial reports for Ministry of Transport. And Mr. Speaker, one of the recommendations that has been given out here, which I want to read, is that the EACC should expedite the completion of the investigation of irregularities into retention funds for financial year 2013, 2014, 2015, with a view to prosecute those involved in the misuse of public funds. Mr. Speaker, I have looked at this one. Then the other recommendation, Mr. Speaker, on the second page, that is 467, is that the EACC should expedite the completion of investigation of irregularities into retention funds for financial years 2006 to 2007, 2007 to 2008, 2008 to 2009, 2009 to 2010. Mr. Speaker, we are talking about, right now we are in the financial year 2018-2019. Mr. Speaker, we are recommending that EACC should undertake investigations on operations of this ministry on financial years 2006, Mr. Speaker. This is almost 10 years down the line, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, right now, I am aware that the new CEO of EACC is being recruited. Mr. Speaker, this House must ensure that the capacity of EACC is enhanced. Because, Mr. Speaker, if right now we are talking about asking EACC to investigate matters of 2006, when will they investigate matters of 2010, 2013, 2011? You know, we are talking about a backlog in the area of investigation. And, Mr. Speaker, this report, I have looked at it keenly. Every ministry, there's a recommendation about EACC to engage in certain aspects. It therefore means, Mr. Speaker, that just by reading this report, you can clearly see the magnitude of corruption in this country. Because there is no single ministry where a recommendation for investigation by EACC has not been given. It therefore means that corruption is the order of the day in this government. And so, Mr. Speaker, as a House, we must be serious and ensure that we give EACC capacity to investigate some of these pending issues. And, Mr. Speaker, it is very clear, and we all know, that EACC does not have the capacity, they do not have the resources required to investigate national government as well as county governments. Today, Mr. Speaker, EACC only moves into investigations if a matter has been raised in the media or if there's a matter of political interest. And EACC also, Mr. Speaker, must be able to get competent people, Mr. Speaker, to be able to do this job. If we go this way, Mr. Speaker, then we are not, as a House, we are not going to reign on corruption, which is cardinally one of our responsibilities. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge the House that if the matters of EACC comes before this House, Mr. Speaker, let us look at these issues very seriously, because investigations of corruption is clearly tied to this report, and it is tied to this report because this report, to be implemented fully, then we must also implement the recommendations that this report has given us. If we do not do that, Mr. Speaker, then we will not have helped this country. Mr. Speaker, I have also observed, Mr. Speaker, that some recommendations and the amendments that were tabled before the House are recommending that the Auditor General undertakes further audits. Mr. Speaker, if you ask the Auditor General to undertake further audits, and we know very well that the audit exercises are questions of resources. We have not applied resources to to the Auditor General to continue undertaking further audits that we are requesting. Mr. Speaker, we are being unfair to the Auditor General. And Mr. Speaker, let me say that the current Auditor General of this country, Edward Ouko, is probably one of the best and the most competent auditors in Africa. And therefore, we really, as a House, should not come here, Mr. Speaker, to begin to doubt the reports that have been tabled here by our Auditor General, simply because we want to be able to protect certain interests. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, the amendment that have succeeded in this House today is very unfortunate because, Mr. Speaker, we cannot be here to ring fence and to be gatekeepers of corruption networks. If the committee has done their report, let us adopt it. Let us not begin to challenge the reports because we are trying to protect certain interests. I am not happy, Mr. Speaker, that certain...
The Honorable Atandi, the House has got a mandate to deal with the reports, to amend, to delete, and if it expresses itself in one way or the other, then it is the voice of the House. We might not be happy with it. We can criticize it. We can actually be unhappy with it, but that is the voice of the House. Very well. Your contributions are quite good otherwise, and it's a good thing. I will now give this opportunity to the Honorable Maero, member for Butula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this report of the PSC. Mr. Speaker, the report is huge, and this report appears to be growing bigger and bigger year after year. And the major items that appear in the report are pending bills, unsupported expenditure, impress, and so forth. Mr. Speaker, time has come when the Treasury should now look for ways of reducing or clearing these pending bills. I'm aware, Mr. Speaker, that we have had committees in the Treasury that have been looking at pending bills. These should have been completed by now. The committee should have come up with the ways of curbing these pending bills issue. It is known that pending bills form the first charge in the new financial year. And therefore, we should not continue having queries on pending bills in every ministry. You must find something to do with pending bills. Something must be done by Treasury to stop these pending bills in every financial year. Mr. Speaker, many of my colleagues have talked about unsupported expenditure. I don't see why we should be having unsupported expenditure. This is just a question of hiding some of the wrongdoings that ministries do. Every expenditure needs to be supported. I do not see a situation where a cashier can enter an expenditure in his cash book without supporting documents. If they are lost or if they are destroyed, that means that it's a question of theft, which should be handled by the right arm of the government. Mr. Speaker, there is a question of imprests. Imprests have been an old problem in the ministries. Officers are given imprests, knowing very well that they're supposed to clear. If the ministries or if the Treasury is unable to control imprests, Treasury should devise a way of ensuring that if an officer takes some money, it should be recorded as an expenditure. And they should make sure that the rules are followed instead of expecting imprest to be surrendered when actually they cannot be surrendered. At times you find that officers use those imprest monies for their personal use. So to come and get them surrendered becomes a problem. So it is now for the Treasury to come up with new rules and regulations to curb this issue of misuse of interests. Mr. Speaker, the control of government expenditure is very important. All the rules of government expenditure must be followed by the ministries. Ministries know the rules. Ministries know the systems that they should follow. So we should not have the control and the Auditor General coming up with these queries every year. They have become too much. Matching of expenditure with revenue. If the ministries do not match expenditure with revenue, Mr. Speaker, that's when we have a lot of pending bills. At times, the ministries commit the government before knowing whether they will get the cash or not. The purpose of IFMIS was meant to enable the ministries match the revenue with the expenditure before any commitment is incurred. I think IFMIS should be applied to enable the ministries know that they can only commit the government if they know that revenue is available to meet the expenditure. Mr. Speaker, this problem is so big in ministries that you will find a lot of commitments that have not been covered with the revenue. Mr. Speaker, the other area where the ministries need to be very careful is on the statements of assets and liabilities. These statements are not properly prepared, Mr. Speaker. And you'll find that losses, if any, are heaped under suspense accounts within the statements of assets and liabilities. Mr. Speaker, these now need to be looked into critically to ensure that any losses hidden within the suspense accounts are brought out and either written off or people are made to answer for them. There are huge figures in the suspense accounts of ministries, Mr. Speaker, which now should be looked at carefully. Mr. Speaker, this report is huge, and it is huge because of the repeated mistakes that are done in the ministries. And there are specific areas that come into the report every year, Mr. Speaker. These areas are the ones that the auditor now should be more serious, because why should we have expenditure which is not supported? Why should we have uncompleted projects? Uncompleted projects is an eyesore. In my constituency, Mr. Speaker, the DC's office has been, was left uncompleted for now 5 years. Yet, the money should have been allocated to complete that. So uncompleted projects has become an eyesore in the eyes of the citizens of this country. Something should be done, Mr. Speaker. I therefore wish to support this report, Mr. Speaker, and get together with the amendments so that the auditor can now revisit some of the areas that were possibly not looked at properly, so that we can clear some of these issues which have been an eyesore to the public, Mr. Speaker. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support this report. Thank you.
Very good contributions, the Honorable Maero, and especially on interests. It is, I think, imperative that interest takers should know that interest should be accounted for and surrendered where it is not expended. I think a lot of those people who take interest imagine that it must be exhausted in whichever way that but it is supposed to facilitate the work, and where it is not used for the purpose of the job that one is sent to do, then it should be returned and accounted for. The Honorable Odhiambo Odhiambo Ochieng, member for Game.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to support the report by the Public Accounts Committee. And I think, not to belabor the point that my colleagues have conversed about, I think it's prudent that we congratulate Edward Ouko for being candid and having done a good job in the context of revealing the flaws that exist in our ministries. Having said that, I think it's important to note that audit report helps in the independent and systematic examination of statutory records and books of account. I think it's important, even as we look at the accounts as presented by the audit report, it's important to look at what would help us achieve a good level of efficacy by ensuring that the processes that are not working well, the processes that have been pointed out by the auditor for improvement, are enforced so that in the next audit, we can see an improvement from those ministries based on the flaws that were previously pointed out. Because if the ministries don't learn anything, any lesson from the audit report, then it would be like an audit report to the ministry then would mean a flagel. And that brings me to the point. I think the report by PSC is very comprehensive and has given DCI and ESCC a clear mandate. So their jobs are well cut. Our business as members of parliament would therefore mean to support those agencies to ensure that those who plunder national resources are brought to book so that the future generations are protected. This must be done based on the evidence that exists in the report. So I'm calling on those two agencies to take bold actions based on the report that ensure that our future generations, the monies that belong to this country, are protected. So it's important to point out something that we need to think of as a country. If you look at our students who have studied the scorecard points about four things. Points on customer perspective, the learning perspective, the internal processes, and the financials. So the audit report then would focus on the financials and the internal processes. It's more important that we have an audit report that is proactive. Is it possible that you can have an audit report that would hold officers accountable the same year or a year after when the budget has lapsed? So that we don't wait for so many years to get an audit report, which should be more of historical than looking at the current happenings. So in my perspective, I think that we need to engage the Auditor General's office. If they can expedite and ensure that in time we can get this auditor report early enough so that we can prosecute, the agencies can prosecute those who are culpable in good time so that the ones working can see that if you plunder the country resources, then you'll be held accountable. And it is also important to point out that one of the benefits of audit report is on improving the processes. So the audit report, other than pointing out those who are culpable, should be able to point out how do we improve on the processes that exist so that in using those improved processes, we can reduce the plunder of the country resources. Mr. Speaker, sir, with those few remarks, I support.
Very well, the Honorable Elisha, it is true that the Public Accounts Committee, being in the nature of a mortician, should be able to carry out its duties when the body is still fresh, when the bones, when the flesh is still on the bones, rather than carrying it out much later when the flesh has dissipated and gone away, so that they're only carrying out their work on the bones only. Very good contribution. The Honorable Wahome Mudhoni, member for Kandara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to support the Auditor General's report as brought by this committee, the committee's motion in this respect. And Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with most of my colleagues that have spoken here, and particularly say that I'm saddened as I make these remarks, because if you look at this House, Mr. Speaker, maybe it speaks to the fact that members are not actually taking up their role, oversight role, seriously, because if there is any single important report to this House, Lily, is the report of the auditor as examined by the PAC committee, which is mandated by this House. The committee, of course, reports to this House, and it is important that as many members as possible speak to this report and oversight. As a new mandate in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, is possibly where we are not doing very well. And we need, even as a House, to examine how we can efficiently do that role. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, you know that some of the concerns of members of Parliament that are not willing to support the 2/3 gender bill are speaking to the question of huge wage bill, and we have been reminding them to speak to the wastage, to speak to the economic plunder that is happening in this country. The auditor's report is a document that speaks for itself. It has highlighted various places. The committee has combed through and spent a lot of time working through this report of the auditor. And really, where we are as a country, it is something we must rise and now put a stop to the wastage, to the plunder, to the theft and robbery with violence. Because I think, Mr. Speaker, we can't keep on taking Kenyans' monies. When you look at this report, two issues that I really want to speak to during this debate on this report is the pending bills. Mr. Speaker, there is a theft of Kenyans' monies, Kenyans who are working with the government. They have days on end been waiting to be paid, Mr. Speaker. And the counties have taken the bad habit from the national government of failing to pay contractors, suppliers that have worked, Mr. Speaker. What happens if you did your contract and did delivery of whatever you were delivering through a contract, and then 5 years down the line, you have not been paid, and you have borrowed? So you will find that very, very huge debts are being carried forward by counties. Of course, new governors will not be willing to pay for those debts, and therefore, where we have pending bills of over 632 million in that respect, then, Mr. Speaker, you will see that we have a problem. The Auditor General has done his part. He has highlighted where we need to scrutinize. He has even given instances where the Director of Public Prosecution can put his attention and his finger and hand on people who have stolen. We want to see action, and we are aware at the moment that the EACC recruitment is occurring or is happening of the CEO for the EACC. And many times members have expressed concerns about the efficiency, about the effectiveness of the EACC. And I think the reports, when they have been tabled and adopted by this House, then the next institutions, the judiciary, the EACC, the DCI need to move forward and prosecute or maybe carry out sufficient investigation. In most cases, Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General has highlighted theft that is clear, that even moving forward, it becomes very easy for institutions that are supposed to do enforcement work, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I would want to see for once that the country is getting value for paying the office of the Auditor General. We are aware that it is an independent office, supposed to work independently, and this House, I believe, has given sufficient support to the Auditor General. I know that last term, he was also saying that he needed to be funded sufficiently and adequately to be able to carry out his work. And therefore, I want also to support that his office should be capacitated ably and sufficiently to be able to carry his work. He needs the political goodwill to ensure that he does what he needs to do. But there are issues that he has raised regarding the CDF, and I don't know whether members have a concern regarding how we are supposed to show proof, the offices of the constituencies on NGCDF, how they prove by way of receipts the payments to the bursaries. Because that I find as a member of parliament, because as an oversight also, I look and see that many schools that we pay the checks to are not giving the receipts to support that this NGCDF has actually paid bursaries. And you'll find that when the report of the auditor comes, it's like, you know, there is an outcry, like this money is lost, Mr. Speaker, although the checks speak for themselves. The offices of the Treasury that are in our sub-counties are also clear that we have paid. So I think that in short, Mr. Speaker, I want to support this report. I am still feeling bad about us not going to the vote yesterday, but you know, generals continue with the war. Losing one battle, Mr. Speaker, does not mean we have lost the war. And therefore, I want to encourage the honorable members that were keenly following the two-third gender bill. And in fact, when I was thinking about it in the night, Mr. Speaker, looking at the issue, then the question of the spending that seems to be, you know, blurring the genuine constitutional debate, Mr. Speaker, I was saying we needed a maidthometer, gadgets called maidthometer. We look for technology to even hearthometer some of the people in this house, and particularly hearthometer to measure the heart of the leader of majority, who was the mover of the bill, Mr. Speaker. And with those remarks, I want to say that if you look at what is today that we are not here, it means yesterday was a good moment for those who were championing even that bill. I want to support the Auditor General's report. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that time.
The Honorable Wahome, you must be advocating for a passionometer to determine the passion in the heart of those who are supporting the two-thirds gender. Yes, that must be it.
And yeah, I would even adopt your description of the passionometer, but we needed to measure also the length of where the hearts are, the depth of the hearts, so that we can be able to be confidently saying we had enough support. But thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, passionometer could be a relevant word in that regard. Thank you very much.
Very well. Very good contribution, the Honorable Wahome. We shall have the Honorable Adhiambo Odwal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on this motion. And Mr. Speaker, on the outset, I'd like to congratulate the Public Accounts Committee. And I do that, Mr. Speaker, because we know that there had been a bit of concern that the Public Accounts Committee was not giving us a report. And I want to congratulate the committee and the chair, Honorable Wandai, for the kind of report that speaks volumes, not only in size, but in content. And Mr. Speaker, as I support this, I want to continue to indicate that when we look at this report, it helps us in a very significant way to enable the public, the citizens that we represent, appreciate the seriousness of the work that we do in this House, Mr. Speaker. A number of Kenyans, when they hear the term Auditor General, they tend to make judgments that do not really get them to appreciate the role of the Auditor General. Derives his authority from Article 229 of the Constitution, but much more importantly, Mr. Speaker, that the Auditor General's role is to oversight or to give assurance that gives accountability and ensures and confirms that the funds, public money, has been applied lawfully or is being used in ways that are in the best interest not only of the Kenyans, but really in keeping with our Constitution. It is for this reason, Mr. Speaker, that as I support this report, I want to first indicate that when we look at the recommendations, it would really be important that we note that the committee has been thorough, but we also, as has been pointed by colleagues here, want to laud the Auditor General, but also hope that we will not be giving the Auditor General responsibility to report on what should be standard practice. Mr. Speaker, I refer, for example, to the recommendation with regards to documentation on financial statements and recommendation that would be indicating that the cabinet secretaries take immediate action to ensure that ministries, departments, and agencies adhere to standards, that when we are looking at IFMIS, and we know that the very purpose of coming up with this IFMIS was to get an independent system that would enable us to manage and safeguard public funds, then we find that the very system is itself, Mr. Speaker, seems to be creating a problem. I remember, Mr. Speaker, at one time, the permanent secretary then, Honorable Dorothy Angote, one time walking to Treasury and demanding, because as a permanent secretary, she felt extremely frustrated by the delay in releasing funds for the implementation of activities, and demanding to say, can I see this IFMIS? Because at every given time, whenever there were challenges or whenever there was a delay in releasing funds, it would be blamed on IFMIS. And I remember, Mr. Speaker, that that's the time when I got curious, and I was not quite sure, because it is amazing that after she stormed and demanded that she wanted to know this IFMIS and see IFMIS, somehow, strangely, it seems that something was unlocked and the money was released. And so, Mr. Speaker, one of the key concerns for me is that we are clearly, as we read report year in, year out, and knowing very well the role of the Auditor General and the manner in which this comes, and with such a thorough also report from the committee that is relevant in the House, the Public Accounts Committee, that we would be, in a way, vague, Mr. Speaker, because when we look at this IFMIS, we can see that it's epitomizes some very systematic way of just not being accountable. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, that we will avoid situations that would look like we are ourselves continuing to normalize this kind of practice. So I want to laud the committee, because they have clearly indicated that there be an independent system audit. I would, in keeping with some of my colleagues, say that we really do not need to keep auditing. What we have seen is not working. I think we need to ensure that we make changes. Mr. Speaker, I also particularly like the manner in which, when we look at this, we have been brought to some practices that we are beginning to accept as normal, because whenever you engage in certain tendencies, even if they are not really lawful or not in keeping with required procedure, people tend to accept them. And this would be with regards to the casual manner in which litigation and a lot of very serious service is given in government ministries that incur unforeseen expenditure, that lead to pending bills, that just seem to, year in, even as we get into budgeting, be overlooked. I think the committee has brought this, flagged it out, and I think it's a very good issue. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I would want to also support this report as I speak to the issue of a practice that has also emerged, where we get executive order that will classify private entities as public entities, and as the report indicates, proceeding to award public funds to private entities in a context where the private entities would not by themselves have the parameters that would give them room to account in keeping with the Public Finance Management Act. Mr. Speaker, just 2 weeks back, I had the opportunity in the House, and Mr. Speaker, I remember it was a time when I was practicing how to speak over the voice of put the question, because there was the question of the the amendment that was in the Miscellaneous Amendment Act regarding the children's National Children's Adoption, and there was a specific reference to Child Welfare Society of Kenya. And I think part of what this report has brought, which in my view did not come out so clearly then, is that there are ways in which sometimes, if we do not do due diligence, then we would make legislation or come up with proposals that we would think help solve a problem, but which compound them. Mr. Speaker, the report clearly indicates that the practice where we have, by executive order, classification of private entities as public entities and then awarding public funds gives loopholes, because the public funds that are then awarded to private entities cannot really be accounted for. And we get a situation where lots of money is not only used in ways that we cannot account for, but Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, when we are thinking of children, which in this case was my major concern, then we compound a very, very difficult issue. So, Mr. Speaker, as I support this, I can see that this committee has in particular given the example of the wildlife clubs of Kenya and the Child Welfare Society as the kinds of avenues that we need to be vigilant and which we must ask those who are charged with the responsibility of oversight take into account. Mr. Speaker, finally, because I know that today is a quiet moment, and I also know that it is close, as Honorable Wahome indicated, a day after the two-thirds gender bill, I think, Mr. Speaker, it is clear that the gender bill does not in any way suffer from lack of finances, that when we look at the accounts and when we look at the wastage that we see, then we know that all we need to do is to close these loopholes, and Mr. Speaker would be able to keep to the Constitution and give the right voice to women, men, boys, and girls, all abilities as required. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Professor, you spoke to the Honorable Angote, as she then was PS, coming to the offices and demanding that she wants to see this Mr. Ifmis. It reminds me of a politician who also said that when the students at Nairobi University were rioting, and he heard that they'd been influenced by one Karl Marx, and he demanded that for the arrest and detention of Karl Marx. Very well, very good contributions. We shall have the Honorable Choriyot Jesire, member for Baringo.
Thank you, Speaker, sir. I'm also privileged, Speaker, sir, to be one of those members who is going to congratulate PAC for adopting this report from the Auditor General on issues that touch on the progress and development of this country through allocation of funds and use of money in the country. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've heard many of my colleagues talking, and something that is very clear that's coming from everyone is that there is a lot of uncertainties in issues of expenditure or spending of money in this country. And for sure, as many have said, the pending bills, I'm wondering because every year we are doing budgetary allocations, the Parliament accepts what the ministry is giving us in terms of what they want to spend in the year, and we approve it and we give them. But somewhere down the line, every year we shall get a lot of issues dealing with pending bills. You wonder what happens on the way. But the fact remains, I know the ministry's work is normally very dynamic, but the huge pending bills that we are seeing is not actually in line with the budget and expenditure that actually they gave us as a house. So these pending bills is what is actually taking us back, because when we get to the next year, the financial year, what happens is instead of budgeting forward, we start budgeting backward to pay the bills which are pending. So it is only important for the ministries to actually be disciplined and stick to what they actually ask that they want to do, so that they don't go astray and spend money on other things that they were not in their budget. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, sir, that I saw is when we talk of the unsupported expenditure, I know that is what is worrying the auditor so much, because many of the reports which come show that money has been spent, but nothing is supporting. We know this is a fact in every ministry. Like I had my colleagues saying, when we give out bursaries, we actually do not get back receipts that will actually make the Auditor General confirm that we paid money to certain institutions, especially the schools. So some of these things are the ones which make the Auditor General feel uncomfortable and see that the expenditures that we are using in this country many a times are not supported. But what we want to say is that some procedures, some regulations, some rules should be put so that every other money that is spent in this country is supported. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to speak about the interest. Actually, when I came to Parliament, from the institution I came from, I found a different way of actually surrendering money and even asking for interest. I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are not doing things as per the current way of doing things, the technology that we have. Mr. Speaker, sir, in my former institution where I worked for, is Impress, we used to do it online through a software, such that there is nobody who is going to get impressed maybe twice or cheat. You have to apply online, and when the time comes that you need another impress, if you had not surrendered even 1 shilling, the system will not accept you, and you will not be in the list of those who are going to receive the next impress. So my thinking, Mr. Speaker, sir, is as a country, we need to run away from the old methods of using papers or pens. We need to go to get a system, a software that can be very transparent, that has no corrupt deals, so that it becomes easy for us to actually surrender our money without making friendship using the government money. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, sir, is I'm worried because since I came here and learned a few things, it is unfortunate if we don't watch well, we are institutionalizing corruption in our institutions, particularly ministries. Because when we don't look at the budget, the requests that the ministries make, and actually critique them, in an event that we are not serious, especially at the committee level, when a ministry or a body brings you their budget, you should be able to look at it deeper and be able to know whether the money which these people are asking is the money that is going to actually work for Kenyans, or some people are budgeting for other things which are not actually very important and will get a loophole. And Mr. Speaker, sir, what I've learned also is that many of these people, when they do budgetary, They do budgets skewed to business other than changing the lives of the public. So we are going to try and run away from giving people budgets which are going to only please the businessmen and not work to support and change the life of the poor Kenyans. So that we are not going to budget, and after giving out all the billions, the lives of the people in comparison through that ministry is not changing. So we want to actually look at these small things that we are complaining about every time. The other bit, Mr. Speaker, sir, is, it's unfortunate that government is complaining against itself. Why am I saying like that, Mr. Speaker, sir? Because if it is corruption, Speaker, sir, corruption in this country right now is more of the of ministry level, at the ministry level. So the ministry, the Auditor General always, when he's talking or when he's giving us report, is talking about some things which are not working well in a ministry. So what am I saying? Auditor General is an office mandated to audit all government institutions. Who is this being audited? It is the government institutions. Now it is government complaining against the government. It is shame. We need to change, refrain from this behavior. Yes, I've heard. EACC has been given some powers, is mandated to investigate. So far, we've seen DPP doing its work. But then, many people have been apprehended to court. They have been taken there. The game doesn't stop there. Judiciary, as a body, is the one that is going to give us way forward, because the cases should be determined in a manner that will make the people who are corrupt to deter. Should be deterrence in nature. So that, Mr. Speaker, sir, if we don't win war against corruption, I am telling you, I am sure so many people will join it. As usual, if we don't win the war against corruption, people will join it. And we want to see things happening, because it is all about somebody has been arrested, people see you what, but what we don't see is what has happened to them. Where is our money? What properties have been taken back to the government from these people? So if it is about corruption and arresting, so many people will say, okay, once you get the money and then you are arrested, use the money, you get out, and it will make other people do it. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is important that all arms of the government should be able to work together in tandem to bring sanity in our ministries, in the government, in our institutions, so that, Mr. Speaker, sir, in future, we shall not be laughing. We shall not be having EACC, DPP as a laughing stone, Mr. Speaker, sir, a laughing stock. Because if we don't actually punish people to that level, that another person will not dare to steal the money from the government, it will be very unfortunate for this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to also recommend and say, good reports come from this country, from all quarters of institutions. This country is known of making very wonderful reports with a lot of English in it, with calculated mathematics. But the most unfortunate part of it, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that these reports don't see the light of the day in terms of implementation. Mr. Speaker, sir, we should work towards implementing the reports that we make. As much as they are good, implementation part is the part that we want to see it happen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Very good and fundamental contributions, but the judiciary will only convict, I believe, if the evidence that is presented before it is cogent and supports conviction, because there is a presumption of innocence for all those people who are accused and taken to court. They also have a right. So it is incumbent on those institutions that have the mandate to investigate and to prosecute, to pull up their socks and present to the judiciary evidence that will support the charges that they prefer against these people that they make allegations against. I think that is the fundamentals and the grounding of
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and from the outset, allow me, by your indulgence, to encourage my sisters here and out there that no war was lost yesterday. We were ready for the war, but the referee, in his wisdom, chose to suspend or defer the battle to a later date. So nothing has been lost so far. But again, there is a common adage out there that a good soldier lives to fight another day. So we still are optimistic that this bill will see the light of day, and our sisters, mothers, daughters will be able to enjoy the fruits of what is enshrined in the Constitution as regards what is due to them. I also, in the same breath, Mr. Speaker, support the report on the examination of the Auditor General's report on the financial statements for the national government, as is presented by the Public Accounts Committee, led by my brother, Honorable Opiyo Wandayi. Mr. Speaker, Article 229 has given a wide range of responsibilities to the Auditor General, and indeed, there are so many responsibilities that call for proper funding of that department. They look at the national and county government's audit queries, all funds and authorities of the national and county governments, accounts of all courts of law. They also look at every commission and independent offices established by the Constitution. They look at audit queries on the National Assembly, which is where we are, the Senate and county assemblies. They look at political parties' funds, funded from the public funds. And they also scrutinize our public debt, Mr. Speaker. So we need to firstly develop their capacity, because even the report that has been scrutinized and re-examined by the PAC relates to the financial year 2014-2015. And I want to believe that due to the incapacities within the Auditor General's office, they have not been in a position to be up to date, because we could actually be talking about the year 2017-2018. But we can realize that we are 4 years lagging behind time. And I relate this directly to the lack of capacity in terms of personnel, in terms of funding, and many other things that may have negated their promptness. Mr. Speaker, it is quite interesting that they also re-examine our public debt. This is a country that is shouldering very huge burdens on public debt. And we understand that the executive, the president, his deputy, and a few cabinet secretaries would sit down and unilaterally decide on when and where to go for borrowing. We are carrying with us a burden, a financial burden in terms of debts that will be paid not just by this generation, but many, many generations to come. And I would want to, perhaps in due course, present a bill in this House that before this government goes out there to look for monies in terms of borrowing, then there should be a public participation, because it is the public that will shoulder these responsibilities. And I'm afraid that my children may not be in a position to settle these debts, that they played no cardinal responsibility towards their acquisition, Mr. Speaker. We also know that certain monies have been gotten out there, but they never make it to this country. We read about the Eurobond that is still under question as to whether 100 billion shillings made it to this country. So through public participation, I want to believe that we shall have financial prudence, and what is due to this country will have its way to this country. Mr. Speaker, We do have accountants plugged in various government agencies that delay the audit, the audit or audit reports by the Auditor General. And I want to challenge them today to pay much attention to the Public Procurement and Disposal Act and Public Finance Management Act as the guiding principles. We noted in the course of our examination of certain audit reports by the Auditor General, by the Special Funds Accounts Committee, that many a times the presentation of important documents delayed too much and hence affecting the work of the Auditor General. So I want to kindly ask those charged with the responsibilities of administering public monies to always do the right thing at the right time. Timely remissions of internal audit reports and corroborating documents must be presented within a set period of time as is enshrined in the Act. Mr. Speaker, we must deter financial probity, pilferages, and mismanagement of public funds for this country to move forward. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, we know of so much unclaimed assets out there, including M-Pesa accounts that were perhaps run by people who have so far died. So the country may want to engage in some kind of clarity. How much is in terms of the unclaimed assets, where are they, and how would they then be distributed to the public or to their families or to whoever should benefit out of them? So this is an area that we may want to put more teeth in order to bite where necessary. And with all that, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support. And once again, I thank you.
The Honorable Mbai Mbithuka, member for Kitui East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to add on my voice to the report by the Public Accounts Committee on the auditor's report. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I would want to congratulate the Office of the Auditor General because this can be termed as the ultimate protector of public resources. By that I mean, Mr. Speaker, any public officer who is handling public monies in accounts, in procurement, before any commitment, before any, Mr. Speaker, evaluation, they always talk of the external auditors. When they come, what shall we do? Processes need to be clear. Everything needs to be put in the right order because the auditor will be on our case. Mr. Speaker, just imagine in a situation where the Office of the Auditor General is not functional. Mr. Speaker, this country will be looted in less than a week. So first is to applaud the Office of the Auditor General in what they are doing. Maybe we may talk of capacity building, Mr. Speaker, adding some teeth on what they are doing, but so far, so good. Mr. Speaker, on their processes, the Office of the Auditor General, first of all, it protects the plundering of public resources because it deters officers from engaging in corruption. Mr. Speaker, the other thing is they have an advisory administrative action where public systems, finance management systems are not working very well, or they are weak, or they are not well put. The Auditor General's office has always been there to advise the senior management on how to strengthen, on how to streamline finance management system, the account department, the procurement department, public resource management, Mr. Speaker. And also, they do recommendations for further action if it's prosecution where they've seen corruption has taken place, if it's, Mr. Speaker, malpractices, Mr. Speaker, where officers have not followed the law, even if there was no money lost, but Mr. Speaker, some cases we've seen the procedure was not followed, and the Auditor General has been very firm on this. Mr. Speaker, The other thing I would want to recommend is the office, the committee on the Public Accounts Committee, Mr. Speaker, because we've not seen an institution which monitors or which audits the office of the Auditor General. So it is the Public Accounts Committee, Mr. Speaker, which you can say it's the only office in this country which audits, which oversees the office of the Auditor General. So, Mr. Speaker, I would encourage the Public Accounts Committee in whatever they are doing. From the report they've given, it is very clear that, Mr. Speaker, they are doing their job rightfully. We would urge the House to add on their capacity in terms of actually acquiring auditors, because, Mr. Speaker, maybe members would not have enough time to go through documents from the Office of the Auditor General, and also cross-checking some of these reports, because, Mr. Speaker, you can see a report from the Auditor General, maybe on a certain department, on a certain county. The Public Accounts Committee may want to go further and cross-check the report from the Auditor General and what has actually happened within the department. So this may require, Mr. Speaker, capacity in the Public Accounts Committee. But, Mr. Speaker, whatever the Public Accounts Committee has done is commendable. Their report is enormous, is very informative. The content, Mr. Speaker, is very clear that they did their job professionally, and recommend them for that. With all that, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support. Thank you.
The Honorable Bunyasi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to offer my contribution to the report of the Public Accounts Committee. The function of the Public Accounts Committee is an extremely important one, because as a nation, that's the only opportunity we get a chance to comment on the management of public resources in this country, largely as highlighted by the Auditor General, but generally even being able to go beyond what the Auditor General has highlighted. In fact, they have a mandate to sit back and say, has our resources been used with prudence in accordance with the Public Audit Act, the Public Financial Management Act, and ethically in any case. And there are many other laws that govern this, including the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, as I look at this, we can all get impressed by the volume of this, but PAC does handle literally tons and tons of documents. So this is a small abstraction of what they receive. And what matters in my view is the degree to which the observations here will lead to corrective action, either immediately internally or will be taken further by other institutions like the DPP and other institutions to carry it forward, DCI and the DPP. So as I look at this first, just in respect of how their observations can lead to further actions, my concern here is that I don't see a sharp end in this report that would enable the DPP to pick up anything and move on with it. This has happened in all other previous years. As you know, there have been controversies whether people should be named or not named, but the naming was important because finally the DPP will not follow up a department, will not follow up a system failure. The DPP is going to follow up a forensic matter, and a forensic matter will be a matter committed by an individual while serving that capacity or otherwise, so that the culpability can be pinned down not to a group but to individuals. So as I look at this, even in departments that had great difficulty providing adequate data, explaining themselves, like health and agriculture, that I see that the recommendations are fairly tame. And that bothers me. I think that we must not, at the minimum, we must not fall below the level of severity that would have been taken by the Office of the Auditor General. I think that we should carry it further. We should be more bold in dealing with cases like that, because these are ministries that have had, they get lots of donor funds and as well as national revenue, but who have great difficulty in putting it together. The committee will recall that both in the year they have looked at, and it's going to come in the subsequent years, they have had to send them back, to go back and get the act together, then come back again and explain. When you read this, there has been a great effort in smoothing it over, and I think that for me is not a good thing. I think we must be bold where there is culpability and say so. Fortunately, the committee is protected under the rules of the House. They are the only group that can say so with responsibility, but with the clarity that is required under the law. The second thing, Mr. Speaker, sir, there has been a major outcry. There was a major outcry during the course of the period that is being under review in respect of sovereign bonds, and there was a Euro bond, you remember, this has happened every year, and there were great questions about it. This report has just had, I think, the great advantage of sanitizing it and burying it as nothing really happened. Everything has been explained. I think that's a trend that I feel is risky, and if we go that route, there's going to be very little value that Parliament will bring to add to this. The third concern I have, broadly first, is on the revenue account. There's very little mentioned here, particularly on the performance of the KRA. Now, KRA, of course, has the luck that is shielded by the Treasury. There's a firewall around the KRA provided by the Treasury. So the Treasury, we end up dealing with the numbers that Treasury will give us. But KRA, we have complained every year that they need a serious review, perhaps even a forensic review, on issues of revenue collection and revenue management. It can't be that is the institution where if you want to become a billionaire or a millionaire, just join KRA, take a few years and you'll be there. What's happening there? What's happening there? They are the ones who are responsible for the revenue end, and failure on their part increases debt, for example, means the government has to go find some more money. And therefore, I think there should be a sharper focus, in my view, on the functioning of KRA, and there must be a serious effort to break down the firewall by Treasury around KRA, because even they can't explain it fully. If you pin them down, they would say, well, that's a matter that's done by KRA, it's a separate department, but KRA can't just be a little department in Treasury. KRA is a major institution. In many countries, it's an independent authority, as it were, so that it's possible to focus on them in terms of what they do without getting the firewall that we are getting from Treasury. I think that firewall from Treasury is a disservice, and I think we should look at it carefully. Chair, just to conclude a bit on the issue of public debt, which they have touched on, which I think is, I find that a great idea. They have actually commented on that as a category of concerns. Just except the recommendation was somewhat tame, and I guess that looking at public debt as a whole, from the perspective of just one financial year, may have led the committee to feel that, okay, we have only got this slice of view. Let us not be too bold in the broad recommendations. But I think that the issue of how fast the public debt is rising is of major concern, and all we're waiting for is again the next financial year to get exactly the same reactions. There must be a way in which Parliament expresses its disgust, expresses its disappointment, expresses its revulsion at how this is happening. And by how do we do that? We have to look carefully and pin down the institutions that are responsible for debt acquisition. I know it's a higher matter than, say, a CS for Treasury, but CS for Treasury would be at the center of these efforts by the presidency. It's part of the public policy thrust that the president puts in place. But that is manifest through these institutions that we look at here. And I think we really needed to have brought out this a bit more strongly, and I made the recommendation a bit more sharply. Mr. Speaker, I have been going through, not with a fine-tooth comb, but with great effort, the recommendations in departments that have generally been problematic departments. I've mentioned health, I've mentioned agriculture, that if you had sat in these committees and listened to them, you'd expect a lot of material for the DPP. I don't see it here, as a matter of fact. The other area is, and this may be perhaps what they received, but certainly the Office of the President, which had great difficulty in explaining the use of so-called confidential expenditure. We admit that every government has confidential expenditure, but there has been internal systems, even if they are closed to the public, that are rigorous, that look into it. You can't have a system in which you have a department of government that is able to hold literally billions of shillings in slush funds and be unwilling to account because they say, oh, this is confidential. Yes, it is confidential. Can you get a confidential auditor? Can you get a forensic review system internally that looks at how these funds are used? At the end of the day, the taxpayer should also feel that even we must fund those confidential expenditures, of course, but they must be funded in a way that is in accordance to some rules. It can't be completely open-ended. I know we are at war, for example. There are many issues, including terrorism internally, but there are others also, where the use of confidential expenditures, while they were accessible for review, did not show much, did not provide much comfort to anybody who's look at it. Now it's gone completely out of the picture. I think for me, that's a matter of serious concern. I see that I have an orange light. What I would like to add is that this report needed to have strengthened the components of culpability. The culpability can't be always public officers here. There was an individual in that docket, in those dockets, and it's within the norms of the operations and reporting of the committee to name them, to enable the officers that do follow up to be able to pin down exactly who did what, when. That's what makes the public accounts report so critical. That's why it's anchored in the Constitution. That's why we look at it as there's no other committee in this House that can enable Parliament to exercise its Parliament if its mandate, if this reporting is not sharp, clear, without fear or favor. Mr. Speaker, I submit.
You couldn't have put it better. The honorable member the Honorable Bunyasi, you could not have done it better. We'll have the Honorable Nyoro Ndindi, member for Kiharu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I can clearly see we have no much time this session. I want, first of all, to support this report. I actually belong to PAC. And, Mr. Speaker, we have actually been burning midnight oil in our committee because, as you can see now, we are tabling a report that is for a year that is 4 years ago, 14-15 financial year, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I tend to believe that our next report will come much earlier, Mr. Speaker, because we have been working on some matters concurrently between 14-15 and 15-16 financial year, Mr. Speaker. But I want to go direct, Mr. Speaker, to some of the issues that I saw even during our report writing and even in our interactions with government officials, and, Mr. Speaker, especially the accounting officers. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to start by saying that I have realized our country is very rich. In terms of the budget that we read, in terms of the resources that we have, we are actually a country, Mr. Speaker, that can be self-sufficient in terms of the kind of resources we have vis-a-vis the needs that we have as a population of Kenya. But, Mr. Speaker, one of the big elephants in the room, Mr. Speaker, is corruption. And as a member of PAC, I have actually seen corruption, Mr. Speaker, in its true colors. Mr. Speaker, especially the corruption that happens through procurement. And, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that I keep thinking about as I go through and we keep on interrogating the government officials, Mr. Speaker, one, I tend to believe that, and we have even made in our recommendations, that we have a very huge government. And, Mr. Speaker, the bigger the government that we have, the more the entities that we have in terms of the government entities. Mr. Speaker, these are just but avenues of corruption and avenues of siphoning government resources. Mr. Speaker, we have so many entities, Mr. Speaker, that are actually engaged in business. And the more we have these kind of entities that actually compete with private sector, and of course that cannot be as efficient, Mr. Speaker, we only open ways of people corrupting the system. Mr. Speaker, the issue about corruption also, there is the audit that was ordered by our president. But, Mr. Speaker, I tend to believe also, and I want to side with Honorable Bunyasi, that this country, even beyond lifestyle audit, we need to go further and do something I have said before in this House called asset audit. Because, Mr. Speaker, the people who corrupt the system, Mr. Speaker, are not daddaheads. These are people who are very knowledgeable. And Mr. Speaker, they are able to steal government money in a way that you can take them to any court, including the Supreme Court, but you'll never find culpability on their head. But Mr. Speaker, some of these people, we can see glaringly that they have stolen government money. Mr. Speaker, we need to go beyond lifestyle audit and go towards asset audit. Mr. Speaker, if you look in this town of Nairobi, city of Nairobi, any tall building, any significant construction site, Mr. Speaker, you'll find these are government employees. Mr. Speaker, we no longer have public-private sector in this country. We have public-private sector. People who are using public money to advance their private enterprises, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Nyoro, if it is glaring that people have taken public funds, and then you also say in the same breath that it is impossible to nail these people, where is the problem? You cannot have your cake and eat it. If the birds have learned to fly without perching, then you also learn to shoot without missing. Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, in my layman's term, I tend to believe that when, for example, we find culpability or there are investigations going on in some, towards a certain officer in government, to them it is very personal. And they can actually pay any price not to face the law or the full force of law. But on the other side of prosecution, Mr. Speaker, you find an impersonal prosecutor who is just in their job. Mr. Speaker, if you put on the balance somebody who has money, this is so personal to their lives, their families, and their future. And on the other end, on the prosecutor, you find an impersonal government official. Then you put a bait in terms of money, Mr. Speaker. Of course, you know how the outcome will be. Mr. Speaker.
No, Mr. Nyoro, the Honorable Nyoro, I don't know. It cannot be that, those people who take public funds, it becomes more personal to them than those we have mandated to take care of those kind of malpractices. So we cannot make excuses for the prosecutors and the investigators. They must do their job.
And I agree with you 100%, Mr. Speaker. I'm just pointing out the problem and where I think it is. I fight to believe that we don't have patriotic people, especially when it comes to prosecutorial roles in terms of graft. Because the people on the other hand, you put a bit of money, of course, between patriotism and money, most of them choose to take the back. But Mr. Speaker, also, the issue of asset audit, I think you'll go a long way because you'll be targeting where the money is going. And Mr. Speaker, it is very easy. I am a member of Parliament for Kiharu. If, for example, I am an accounting officer anywhere, and I have a multi-billion project going on, and you ask me very simple questions, show me where you are getting money to invest in such an enterprise. Mr. Speaker, it should be very forthright. It should be very direct. But Mr. Speaker, some of such that are happening in this country, Mr. Speaker, these are people who are serving in government offices, but they are doing much more than the billionaires we know who are doing credible business in this country. They are simply using public funds to advance their private affairs, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are so many issues that I can talk about, but the issue of pending bills, Mr. Speaker, is something that I've also seen that is used in government to steal money. Because as you know, Mr. Speaker, pending bills comes as the first charge in the ensuing year. And Mr. Speaker, going through what is called pending bills, Mr. Speaker, interestingly, most of them are actually consumables. Where if you are to ask where is this that you purchased, using these billions in terms of pending bills, Mr. Speaker, these are consumables, and therefore it is something that cannot, it is not anything that can last the test of time, Mr. Speaker, even as we come to auditing where this money went. Mr. Speaker, the animal called IFMIS also. Any query you put forth to these public officials, and especially the public officers, the only place they hide is IFMIS. Mr. Speaker, we have also recommended that IFMIS is not as simplistic, it is not as simple as the simplicity that should actually be brought about by ICT. ICT should simplify matters. But Mr. Speaker, if you try to check the loopholes that are there in terms of IFMIS, Mr. Speaker, it provides very good avenues for these people to hide when we query them. Because, Mr. Speaker, you have multiplicity of people who log into the IFMIS, Mr. Speaker, and it becomes very hard for actually anyone to trace who authorizes, who actually logs in, and who actually manipulates IFMIS for their own, Mr. Speaker, ads. Mr. Speaker, as I come to the end, we have seen in many countries, including China, government officials actually being hanged. And Mr. Speaker, even in some of the countries, engaging in the kind of graft that happens in this country, Mr. Speaker, being taken to committee, Mr. Speaker, is actually a privilege. In some of these countries, Mr. Speaker, like South Korea, where we are having the past 4 presidents currently in jail, Mr. Speaker, engaging in some thresholds of graft, you are actually shot and your family is left behind to actually pay for the bullet. Mr. Speaker, we need such kind of punitive measures in this country because people steal with disdain. You can steal public money and you just know that you're going to set aside a proportion of it to corrupt the system, not even to hire the right lawyers, Mr. Speaker, but actually to buy the judge. Mr. Speaker, we need to have more punitive measures when it comes to graft because there is no difference, Mr. Speaker, between a guy who anapiga geta, watu hapa Nairobi, stealing 200 shillings, Mr. Speaker, and the public official who steals billions of money which can actually go a long way even into supporting our health care. Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I support our committee report as PAC. Thank you very much.
Very well. Honorable members, that was the last contribution, and I see no further interest on this. I therefore direct that when this matter is listed down for consideration, the mover will be called to reply. Honorable members, the time being 1:03 p.m., this House stands adjourned till today, Thursday, the 29th November 2018 at 2:30 p.m. consideration, the mover will be called to reply. Honorable members, the time being 1:03 p.m., this House stands adjourned till today, Thursday, the 29th November 2018 at 2:30 p.m.